In the hospital for just a fracture. Pause. Acting like a child. You need to pull yourself together. Get up and make dinner, or else. We're done. How could anyone react that way to news of their wife in the hospital instead of expressing worry first? Most wouldn't get it, but this is my husband. I can't handle it anymore. I was at my wit's end, but there was someone even angrier with my husband than I was. That turned out to be his own parents. I wonder how he'll respond when they intervene. I'm Eileen, 29 years old. I landed a job at a well-regarded company right after finishing college, even though I don't work at the main office. My salary's quite good. My husband Matt is 32. We met at a client's office, and after a few meetings, he took the initiative to swap numbers. He later invited me to dinner, and after dating for a year and a half, we took the plunge when he proposed. Looking me in the eye, he said, I want to spend my life with you. Eileen, will you marry me? I'm happy, but are you sure about us? I want you, Eileen. You're the only one who makes me feel truly happy when we're together, Matt. Thank you. I want to spend my life with you, too. We were showered with blessings at our wedding and pledged to love each other forever. But 2 years later, if asked if love still exists between us, we couldn't confidently say yes. The reason is simple. Matt has changed in these 2 years. It started with something small. Since we got married, he began gradually shifting household responsibilities to me. We had agreed to split chores evenly, since we were both working before we got married. Despite this, Matt had stopped doing his share of chores like cleaning the bathroom and washing the dishes. Initially, he would reluctantly do them when I reminded him, but gradually, he stopped doing them altogether, even when asked. This increased my workload. Over time, extra hours at work piled up, eating into my sleep. Exhausted both mentally and physically, I decided to talk to Matt about it. When I got home, he was already lounging on the couch with a beer in hand. He didn't even acknowledge me. Despite my frustration, I approached calmly. Hey, Matt, there's something we need to discuss. Keeping his eyes fixed on the TV, he replied, What is it? I took the remote from his hand and turned off the TV. Hey, what are you doing? I was watching that. My husband jumped up, raising his voice. I told you I wanted to talk, right? It's important. Please listen. What a bother. So what's this about? I'm not exactly swimming in free time, you know. Free time. You've been glued to the TV and drinking beer. Holding back the urge to yell, I kept my cool and pressed on. Matt, you haven't been pitching in around the house lately, have you? Why not? We agreed to share chores since we both work, didn't we? Isn't it obvious? Doing housework isn't my job. What do you mean? Cleaning the bathroom and doing dishes were your responsibilities, weren't they? Why should I, as a husband, have to do that? Those tasks are for women. Wait, are you serious? You were the one who suggested we split the chores. That was just for show to look like a good husband, isn't it clear? At our wedding, you've even told everyone, I'm so lucky my husband helps around the house. That was the whole point. Haha. So, you're saying you only helped out to improve your image during the wedding? With a smirk, my husband said, Exactly. I was stunned by my husband's words, unable to comprehend such audacity. I'm exhausted from working late too. After getting home later than you, how could you say something like that to me? Just a reminder, you're not exactly a beauty queen, okay? What? Why are you bringing this up now? What does my appearance have to do with this discussion? Someone as ordinary as me should be grateful to have married someone like you, and you're complaining about simple chores. Know your place. Matt, my husband, shouted and turned on the TV without waiting for my response. He took a sip of his half-empty beer and casually shifted his focus away from me. I couldn't believe it. I'm working late too, so how could he say such things? No matter how I look at it, that's just wrong. I wanted to say a lot, but speaking up now would only lead to a fight. To calm myself, I went straight to bed after taking a bath that night. Since then, I tried repeatedly to talk to Matt, but was always brushed off. Every attempt at conversation was met with, "Don't tell me what to do," leaving no room for discussion. It seemed Matt avoided me, often leaving the house on his days off. Naturally, he neglected housework, even on my days off, leaving me to handle it all at once. Time passed, and as my job entered a busy period, my overtime hours increased significantly. Then Matt exploded again in anger. "Hey, do you know what time it is? Where's my dinner?" Matt started yelling the moment I returned home after a 3-hour overtime shift. "I told you this morning I'd be working late today, so you should either cook or get takeout." "What? Are you serious? Why do I have to cook? I wouldn't mind takeout, but do we even have money for that? Are you going to pay?" "Why should I? I'm busy too, so can you help out a bit?" The mention of busy seemed to trigger him. He kicked the table leg and snapped at me with a furious look. "I don't care if you're busy. You're always doing overtime because you can't manage your time. It's not that. My workload at work is really heavy right now. Don't act like you're all that just because you can handle a bit of work. You should just do what I tell you, you foolish woman." From that day on, I kept my distance from Matt to avoid his scolding. I prepared dinner ahead of time on days I knew I'd be working late. I also took on all the housework on my days off. Looking back, maybe I should have left him right then and there. But even then, I couldn't bring myself to truly hate him. Living like this, my burden gradually became too much to bear. After 2 months, both my body and mind were exhausted, and I lost my motivation for work. One day, on my way to work, I slipped on the subway stairs and fell. Though I remained conscious, I lay immobile, ripped by pain, and had to be transported by ambulance. Even upon reaching the hospital, the agony persisted, restricting my movement. After completing all the tests, the doctor entered my room and said, "You've fractured your leg and have bruises on your arm and back. You must be in a lot of pain." "Yes, I can't move as freely as I'd like. You may be in this state for a few days. You look pale. Have you been feeling tired?" Anyway, I'll need to stay in the hospital for a while. Should I inform my family?" "Yes, please do." As I checked my phone, a message from a colleague awaited me. They had witnessed the ambulance taking me away from the subway station. They had already informed my workplace and contacted Matt, my husband. Exhausted from the day's events, relief washed over me, and I drifted into a deep sleep. Hours later, my phone buzzed, waking me up. Matt's name lit up the screen. Perhaps he was calling out of concern. With a mix of curiosity and apprehension, I answered, "Hello." "Hey, where have you been? Come home right now." Confused by Matt's raised voice, I couldn't hide my confusion. "Wait, didn't you hear? What's going on?" "I had an accident at the station. I'm in the hospital now. I fractured my leg and they're admitting me." After a brief silence, he exploded. "Are you kidding me? Hospitalized? You're not using this as an excuse to avoid doing chores, are you?" "What? No. Why would I lie about something like this? Didn't the office contact you?" "No calls came through. Even if you're trying to trick me, it won't work. And even if it's true, it's not my problem. Just come back and make dinner, all right?" "What?" "Hold on, Matt." My words were cut off as he abruptly ended the call. How could he be so dismissive? Isn't it normal to be concerned when your spouse is hospitalized? Am I just here for Matt to delegate chores to? Exhausted, I lay back down on the bed. A message from Matt popped up on my phone. "If you're not coming home, I'll order takeout. You're paying." As soon as I read the stark, emotionless message, clarity washed over me. It was foolish to dwell on this any longer. Just as I was contemplating divorce, there came a knock on my hospital room door. When I saw who entered, I couldn't believe my eyes. My father-in-law and mother-in-law. "What are you doing here?" My in-laws lived far away and hadn't been close to Matt for some time. After we got married, I rarely saw them, maybe once a year at most. Their unexpected presence baffled me. Seeing my confusion, my mother-in-law spoke gently. "Eileen, we heard you were taken to the hospital in an ambulance. We were worried." "How did you find out?" "We received a call from your office. Ha! But my office tried to reach Matt several times before contacting you. He didn't answer any calls, so they reached out to his childhood home, which was listed as an emergency contact. That's why you're here. Their unexpected kindness brought tears to my eyes. I was genuinely touched that they had come all this way out of concern for me. Holding back my emotions, I gratefully lowered my head to Matt's parents. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, thank you so much. It's all right, dear. We're family, but where is Matt? You mean he hasn't arrived? No. They seemed surprised by my answer. Just then, my phone rang. It was Matt calling. Hello. What's wrong with you? Are you really not planning to come back? Matt's sudden outburst caught Mr. and Mrs. Johnson off guard, and they exchanged worried glances. I gestured for them to stay quiet, placing my finger on my lips. They nodded silently, and I responded to Matt. I've been admitted to the hospital. I won't be able to come home for a few days. Hospitalized for a fracture. Stop being so delicate. Get yourself out of there and make some food. Mrs. Johnson looked ready to protest, but Mr. Johnson held her back. Matt continued ranting, unaware his parents were listening. Just so you know, if you don't, we're getting a divorce, okay? A divorce? Are you serious? Of course. Why wouldn't I be? There's no reason to stay with someone like you who not only lacks attractiveness, but also neglects their household duties. Haha. His laughter over the phone left me speechless, stunned by his callousness. Isn't this going too far? He had always belittled others. I had to respond. Hey, are you serious saying things like that? Your parents are furious. What are you talking about? His response was light-hearted, as if he thought it was a joke. I handed my phone to my in-laws and let them take over. They unleashed a fierce reprimand through the phone. Matt, how could you say such things to Eileen? How can you be so heartless when your wife is in the hospital? We don't even recognize you as our son anymore. You're disowned. Wait, hold on. It's not what you think. There's a reason for this. There's no excuse for your behavior. All you do is spew venom. I'm ashamed to call you my son. Apologize to Eileen right now. Feeling cornered by his parents, my husband suddenly turned on me. Eileen, enough. Using my mom and dad like this. Exploiting them. It's your fault for not answering your company's call, isn't it? That's why they had to get involved. They called that number from your office. How misleading. Fine, I'll divorce you. Are you okay with that? I released all the pent-up anger and resentment, stating my ground. Divorce? Bring it on. I want nothing to do with a man like you. How long will you continue to think you're above everyone else? I have no reason to stay married to you anymore. If you understand that, never show your face to me again. Get lost, you piece of garbage. Following the divorce from my husband Matt, he initially hesitated, but with the help of my in-laws recommending a divorce attorney, we managed to separate amicably. The divorce brought significant changes to Matt's life. He began eating out for every meal, and his health declined. Unable to manage his laundry, I heard he showed up to work in wrinkled suits and shirts. Consequently, his reputation among coworkers took a nosedive. Did you hear? He didn't even visit his wife in the hospital. That's pretty messed up. Well, no wonder she left him. Ha ha ha. Over time, Matt began to skip work without giving any notice. With no one supporting him, it seemed inevitable that he would soon be pushed to resign. On the contrary, I was discharged from the hospital and returned to my usual work routine. Despite now being divorced, my job kept me occupied, lessening the impact more than I had anticipated. Moving forward, if I have the chance to meet someone new, I'll carefully evaluate them to ensure I find genuine happiness next time.
I wiped the flour from my hands, inhaling the sweet aroma of freshly baked cookies wafting through my kitchen. The front door creaked open, and I turned to see Derek sauntering in, his trademark charming smile plastered across his face. "Hey, darling, smell those cookies, but I have something even sweeter for you," he said, his eyes twinkling with mischief. I couldn't help but smile back, even as a flicker of unease passed through me. There was something off about his expression, a darkness lurking beneath the surface that I couldn't quite place. "Oh, and what might that be?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. Derek reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. My heart skipped a beat as he dropped to one knee. "Emma Rowland, will you marry me?" The world seemed to stop. This was everything I'd ever dreamed of, wasn't it? Yet that nagging feeling of doubt persisted. "Derek, I don't know what to say," I stammered. His smile faltered for a moment. Say yes. Of course. We're perfect together, Emma. Think about it. The successful marketing exec and the talented baker. We'll be unstoppable. I hesitated, my hand unconsciously moving to rest on my slightly swollen belly. We'd only known each other for 6 months, and I was already 3 months pregnant. It all felt so fast. What about the baby? I asked softly. Derek's eyes hardened for a split second before his charm offensive kicked back in. That's why this is perfect timing, sweetheart. We'll be a real family. I took a deep breath, pushing my doubts aside. Yes, Derek. Yes, I'll marry you. He slipped the ring on my finger and pulled me into a kiss. It should have been magical, but something felt off. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of wedding preparations. I was at my parents' house, discussing flower arrangements with my mother, when my phone buzzed with a text from Derek. Sorry, babe. Late meeting. Don't wait up. I frowned, showing the message to my mom. That's the 3rd time this week, I said. Mom patted my hand. I'm sure he's just busy with work, dear. Planning a wedding and preparing for a baby is a lot of stress. I nodded, not entirely convinced. I guess you're right. Later that evening, I was about to head home when I overheard my parents talking in hushed tones in the kitchen. I don't like it, Marge, my father's gruff voice carried. Something's not right with that Derek fellow. Oh, Harold, you're just being overprotective, Mom replied. Emma's a grown woman. She can make her own choices. But a shotgun wedding? And have you seen the way he looks at her sometimes? Like she's, I don't know, a prize he's won? I backed away, my heart pounding. Was I making a terrible mistake? The day of the wedding arrived all too quickly. As I stood in the bridal suite, adjusting my veil, my best friend Lily burst in, her face pale. Emma, I need to talk to you, she said urgently. Lily, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. She wrung her hands nervously. I saw Derek outside. He was on the phone, arguing with someone. My stomach dropped. What did you hear? Lily hesitated. He said, don't worry, baby. Once we're married, I'll have access to her trust fund. Then we can be together. The room spun around me. I clutched the vanity for support, my mind reeling. Emma? Lily's voice sounded far away. What do you want to do? I looked at my reflection in the mirror, at the hopeful bride staring back at me. In that moment, I knew I had a choice to make, one that would change the course of my life forever. I need to talk to Derek, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Right now. I stared at the positive pregnancy test, a mix of joy and dread swirling in my stomach. Derek and I had been married for just 3 months, and already the cracks in our relationship were starting to show. I took a deep breath and headed downstairs to share the news. Derek, I called out, entering the living room. He was sprawled on the couch, scrolling through his phone. What is it, Emma? He asked, not bothering to look up. I swallowed hard. I'm pregnant. His head snapped up, eyes wide. For a moment I saw a flicker of, was it panic? But then his trademark smile spread across his face. That's wonderful, darling, he said, standing up to embrace me. But his hug felt stiff, forced. As the weeks passed, Derek's behavior became increasingly erratic. He'd come home late, reeking of alcohol and perfume that wasn't mine. When I'd confront him, he'd turn it around on me. You're being paranoid, Emma, he'd snap. This pregnancy is making you crazy. One night, I was folding laundry when his phone buzzed on the nightstand. I shouldn't have looked, but something compelled me. The text message preview made my blood run cold. Can't wait to see you tonight, baby. Don't forget the champagne. R. My hands shook as I put the phone down. I heard the front door open and Derek's footsteps on the stairs. Hey, I'm heading out, he called. Work dinner. I met him in the hallway, my heart pounding. With R? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Derek's face hardened. You went through my phone? Who is she, Derek? He laughed, a cold, cruel sound that made me flinch. You're being ridiculous, Emma. R is a client. Nothing more. But I saw the lie in his eyes. Don't do this, I pleaded. We're having a baby. We can work this out. Derek's expression softened, but there was no warmth in it. He cupped my face in his hands. Oh, Emma. Sweet, naive Emma. Did you really think a baby would change anything? I recoiled as if I'd been slapped. What are you saying? He sighed, dropping his hands. I'm saying that this, he gestured between us, was never meant to last. You were convenient, Emma, a pretty little housewife to show off at company parties, but you're not enough. You've never been enough. Tears streamed down my face. But our vows, our baby. Derek's laugh was hollow. Vows are just words, Emma. And as for the baby, he shrugged, well, I'm sure you'll make a wonderful single mother. With that, he turned and walked out the door, leaving me standing there, shattered and alone. The next few days passed in a blur of tears and sleepless nights. I was curled up on the couch when the doorbell rang. It was Margaret, Derek's mother. Emma, dear, she said, pulling me into a hug. I came as soon as I heard. How are you holding up? I broke down in her arms, sobbing out the whole story. Margaret listened, her face growing darker with each word. That boy, she muttered. I raised him better than this. As we sat talking, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. Emma, it's Rachel. We need to talk. Derek's been lying to both of us. I showed Margaret the message, my hands shaking. Oh, honey, Margaret said, squeezing my hand. What are you going to do? I took a deep breath, feeling a spark of determination ignite within me. I'm going to meet her, I said, and then I'm going to make Derek pay for what he's done to us. As I typed out a response to Rachel, I felt a shift inside me. The old Emma, sweet, trusting, naive, was gone. In her place was a woman scorned, a mother-to-be ready to fight for her future. Game on, Derek, I whispered to myself. You have no idea what's coming. I stood in the bustling cafe, my heart pounding as I scanned the room for Rachel. A petite blonde waved from a corner table, and I steeled myself as I approached. Emma? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. I nodded, sliding into the seat across from her. Rachel, I presume? She looked nothing like I'd imagined. Young, yes, but with a vulnerability in her eyes that caught me off guard. I'm so sorry, Rachel blurted out. I had no idea Derek was married. He told me you two were separated. I felt a familiar ache in my chest. How long? I managed to ask. 6 months, she whispered. But last week I saw his wedding ring. When I confronted him, he laughed it off, said it didn't mean anything. Just anger flared inside me. That sounds like Derek. Rachel's eyes widened. There's more. I think he's been stealing from the company. I saw some suspicious transfers on his laptop. My mind raced. Could this be the leverage I needed? Our conversation was cut short by my phone ringing. It was the hospital. I was in labor. I have to go, I said, standing abruptly. My water just broke. Rachel looked panicked. Do you need help? Should I call Derek? I shook my head. No, I'll be fine on my own. But as I rushed to the hospital, pain searing through me, I realized how alone I truly was. Hours passed in a blur of agony and fear. Where was Derek? I'd left messages, but he was nowhere to be found. As another contraction hit, I gripped my mother's hand. I can't do this, I sobbed. Mom stroked my hair. Yes, you can, Emma. You're stronger than you know. With one final push, my daughter entered the world. As I held her tiny form, a fierce love unlike anything I'd ever known washed over me. Hello, Ava, I whispered. It's just you and me now. It wasn't until hours later that Derek finally showed up, reeking of alcohol. Where have you been? I hissed, careful not to wake Ava. He shrugged, barely glancing at the baby. Out. Had some things to take care of. Things? I echoed, disbelief turning to rage. Your daughter was being born. Derek's eyes hardened. Don't start, Emma. I'm here now, aren't I? Get out, I said, my voice low and dangerous. He laughed. You can't be serious. I know about Rachel, I spat. And the money you've been stealing. Get out before I call security. For a moment, fear flashed across Derek's face. Then his mask of indifference slipped back into place. Fine, he sneered. Have fun playing single mom. We both know you can't handle it. As he stormed out, I felt a strange mix of relief and terror. What had I done? The next few days were a haze of sleepless nights and tearful phone calls. My parents were a godsend, helping with Ava and offering words of encouragement. You've got this, sweetheart, Dad said one evening, as I struggled to soothe a colicky Ava. One day at a time. A week after bringing Ava home, I received a text from Rachel. Emma, I have proof of Derek's embezzlement. Meet me tomorrow? As I typed my reply, a plan began to form in my mind. Derek had taken so much from me, my trust, my security, my dreams of a happy family. But I refused to let him take my future. I looked down at Ava, peacefully sleeping in her bassinet. We're going to be okay, little one, I whispered. Mommy's going to make sure of it. With newfound determination, I began to plot my revenge. Derek had no idea what was coming, but he was about to learn that hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, especially when that woman is a mother protecting her child. The first few months of single motherhood were a blur of sleepless nights and tear-stained onesies. Ava was colicky, and I was a mess. But with each passing day, I found a strength I never knew I had. One particularly rough morning, as I rocked a wailing Ava, my mom appeared at my door with a casserole and a determined look. "Emma, honey," she said, taking Ava from my arms, "you need a break. Go take a shower, I've got this." I hesitated, but the allure of hot water and 5 minutes of peace was too tempting to resist. As I stood under the spray, I felt the weight of the past few months wash over me. I sobbed, letting out all the pain and frustration I'd been holding in. When I emerged, feeling somewhat human again, I found Mom in the kitchen, Ava peacefully sleeping in her arms. "How did you do that?" I asked, amazed. She smiled. "Years of practice, dear. Now sit down. We need to talk about your future." Over the next hour we hatched a plan. I'd start a small baking business from home, allowing me to care for Ava while earning an income. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. Weeks passed, and word of my baked goods spread through the neighborhood. I was exhausted but fulfilled, finally feeling like I was regaining control of my life. Then, on a crisp autumn morning, everything changed. I was elbow-deep in cookie dough when there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Derek standing there, looking haggard but still infuriatingly handsome. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice cold. He ran a hand through his hair. I need your help, Emma. I've lost everything. My job, my apartment. Rachel left me." I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction, quickly followed by anger. "And that's my problem because I'm still Ava's father," he said, his eyes pleading. "I want to make things right, for her." I was about to slam the door in his face when Ava toddled into view. "Dada?" she said, her little face lighting up. My heart clenched. I couldn't deny her a relationship with her father, no matter how much I wanted to. "You can see her," I said finally, "but on my terms, and you need to get your life together first." Derek nodded eagerly. "I will, I promise. Thank you, Emma." As he left, I felt a mix of emotions churning inside me. Had I made the right decision? That night, as I was going through some old papers, I stumbled upon our joint bank statements. Something caught my eye. A series of large withdrawals made just before our separation. With growing horror, I realized Derek had emptied our savings account. Fury coursed through me. How dare he come here, playing the repentant father, when he'd stolen our daughter's future? I called my parents, my voice shaking with rage as I explained what I'd discovered. "Oh, sweetheart," Dad said, his voice grave. "You need to talk to a lawyer. This changes everything." The next morning, I made 2 calls. The first was to a highly recommended divorce attorney. The second was to Derek. "We need to talk," I said when he answered. "And this time you're going to tell me the whole truth, or so help me, you'll never see Ava again." There was a long pause before Derek replied, his voice uncharacteristically small. "Okay, Emma, you're right. It's time you knew everything." As I hung up, I felt a strange calm settle over me. This was it, the moment that would define our future. I looked at Ava, playing happily with her blocks, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing. "It's gonna be okay, baby girl," I whispered, more to myself than to her. "Mommy's gonna make sure of it." With renewed determination, I began to prepare for the battle ahead. Derek had no idea what was coming, but I was ready. It was time to fight for the future Ava and I deserved. The aroma of freshly baked cinnamon rolls filled the air as I put the finishing touches on Ava's birthday cake. 5 years had passed since that fateful day when Derek walked out on us, and life had taken unexpected turns. "Mommy, is it time yet?" Ava's excited voice called from the living room. I smiled, my heart swelling with love. "Almost, sweetie. Why don't you help Grandma set the table?" As I watched Ava skip off, I marveled at how far we'd come. My little home bakery had flourished thanks to word of mouth and a loyal customer base. It wasn't always easy, but we were making it work. The doorbell rang, and I wiped my hands on my apron before answering. To my surprise, it wasn't a guest for Ava's party, but a smartly dressed woman I didn't recognize. "Emma Rowland?" she asked, her tone professional. I nodded, a knot forming in my stomach. "I'm Olivia Chen from Le Petit Gâteau. We've heard great things about your baking, and we'd like to offer you a position as our new pastry chef." My jaw dropped. Le Petit Gâteau was one of the most prestigious restaurants in the city. This was the opportunity of a lifetime. I'm flattered," I stammered. "But I have a daughter to consider and my home business." Olivia smiled warmly. We understand. The position comes with flexible hours and a substantial salary increase. Why don't you come by tomorrow for a trial run? As she left, my mind was reeling. This could change everything for Ava and me. But could I really balance it all? The party was a whirlwind of laughter and sugar-fueled excitement. As I watched Ava blow out her candles, I made a silent wish for guidance. The next day, I dropped Ava off at school and headed to Le Petit Gâteau, my stomach in knots. The kitchen was a hive of activity, and I threw myself into the work, losing track of time as I created delicate pastries and intricate desserts. It wasn't until I glanced at the clock that I realized with horror that I was late picking up Ava. I rushed out, apologizing profusely to the head chef. When I arrived at the school, Ava was sitting alone on the steps, her little face tear-stained. "I'm so sorry, baby," I said, pulling her into a hug. Mommy lost track of time. Ava's lower lip trembled. "You forgot about me?" Her words pierced my heart. "Never, sweetheart. I could never forget about you." As we drove home, I wrestled with my decision. The job was amazing, but at what cost? Just as we pulled into our driveway, my phone rang. It was Olivia, offering me the position. "We were impressed with your work today," she said. "We'd love to have you join our team." I took a deep breath, about to decline, when Ava spoke up from the back seat. "Mommy, did you make yummy cakes today?" I smiled at her through the rearview mirror. "I did, sweetie. How would you feel if Mommy made cakes at a fancy restaurant sometimes?" Ava's eyes lit up. "Can I come and taste them?" Suddenly, I saw a way forward. "Olivia," I said into the phone, "I'd love to accept, but I need to discuss some terms about my schedule." After hanging up, I turned to Ava. "How about we celebrate with some ice cream?" As we sat at the kitchen table, enjoying our sundaes, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. We could make this work. I could have my career and be there for Ava. But just as I was basking in this moment of triumph, a familiar face caught my eye through the window. Derek was walking up our driveway, looking as handsome and charming as ever. My blood ran cold. What was he doing here? And why now, when everything was finally falling into place? As the doorbell rang, I knew I had to make a decision. Face Derek and potentially disrupt the life we'd built, or pretend we weren't home and keep him out of our lives for good. Ava looked at me, curiosity in her eyes. "Mommy, who's that man?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. "That, sweetheart, is your father, and it's time we had a long overdue conversation." The aroma of roast turkey filled Margaret's house as I put the finishing touches on my pumpkin pie. Thanksgiving had always been a big deal in the Rowland family, but this year felt different. Tension hung in the air like a thick fog, and I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. "Emma, dear, could you help me with these plates?" Margaret called from the dining room. As I arranged the china, I caught sight of Derek through the window, pulling up in his flashy sports car. My stomach churned. It had been months since I'd last seen him, and the memory of our encounter at Le Petit Gâteau still burned. "Grandma, look, Daddy's here!" Ava squealed, running to the door. I exchanged a glance with Margaret, whose lips were pressed into a thin line. She knew as well as I did that Derek's presence would complicate things. The moment Derek walked in, the atmosphere shifted. He scooped Ava up, showering her with kisses and presents, while barely acknowledging me or his mother. As we gathered around the table, I could feel the weight of unspoken words pressing down on us. Margaret cleared her throat, her voice strained as she asked us to join hands for grace. That's when I saw a flash of red on Derek's collar. Lipstick. My heart raced as I remembered Rachel, the young woman I'd seen him with at the restaurant. Throughout the meal, Derek regaled everyone with tales of his business successes, carefully omitting any mention of his personal life. But I couldn't stay silent any longer. The truth was clawing its way up my throat, demanding to be heard. "So, Derek," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "how's Rachel doing these days?" The table fell silent. Derek's fork clattered against his plate. I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, but the panic in his eyes told a different story. "Oh, I think you do," I pressed on, fueled by years of pent-up anger. "I saw you with her at Le Petit Gâteau. You looked quite cozy." Margaret gasped, her eyes darting between Derek and me. "Son, what is she talking about?" And just like that, the dam broke. Words poured out of me, every lie, every betrayal, every moment of heartache Derek had caused over the years. I told them about the affair, the stolen money, the broken promises. Derek's face contorted with rage. "You don't know what you're talking about," he shouted, slamming his fist on the table. "I've always provided for Ava." "Provided?" I laughed bitterly. "You mean the child support checks that bounce half the time? Or the promises to show up that you never keep?" Margaret's face had gone pale. "Derek, is this true? Have you been lying to all of us?" For a moment I saw a flicker of shame cross Derek's face, but it was quickly replaced by his usual charm offensive. "Mom, you know me," he said, reaching for Margaret's hand. "Emma's just bitter. She's always been jealous of my success." But Margaret pulled away, her eyes filled with a mixture of hurt and disappointment. "I think I'm finally seeing you clearly for the first time, Derek, and I don't like what I see." The room erupted into chaos. Derek yelled, Margaret cried, and Ava, confused and frightened, clung to my leg. In the midst of it all, I felt a strange sense of calm. The truth was finally out. As Derek stormed out, slamming the door behind him, I turned to Margaret. Her face was streaked with tears, but there was a resolve in her eyes that I'd never seen before. "Emma," she said, taking my hand, "I owe you an apology, and I think it's time we had a long talk about how we're going to make things right." In that moment, looking at Margaret's determined face and feeling Ava's small hand in mine, I realized that this was far from over. The real battle was just beginning, and I needed to be ready for whatever came next. The weeks following Thanksgiving were a whirlwind. With Margaret's unwavering support and my parents rallying around me, I felt stronger than ever. But I knew Derek wouldn't go down without a fight. I was in the bakery, up to my elbows in bread dough, when my phone buzzed. It was Rachel. "Emma, we need to talk. It's about Derek." My heart raced as I agreed to meet her at a nearby cafe. When I arrived, Rachel looked a mess, her eyes red-rimmed, her usually perfect hair disheveled. "He's been lying to me," she blurted out. "To everyone. I found documents. Emma, he's been embezzling from his company, and there's more." As Rachel spilled Derek's secrets, my mind reeled. The affairs, the stolen money, the web of lies, it was worse than I'd imagined. "I'm so sorry," Rachel sobbed. "I had no idea about you and Ava. I'm leaving him." I reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "It's not your fault. Derek fooled us all." Armed with this new information, I felt a surge of determination. It was time to end Derek's games once and for all. But Derek had one last card to play. The next morning, as I opened the bakery, he was waiting for me. "Emma," he said, his voice honey-sweet, "we need to talk." I steeled myself, letting him in. "Make it quick, Derek, I have work to do." I did. He paced the kitchen, running his hands through his hair. "I've been thinking about us, about our family. I want to make things right." I laughed bitterly. "Right? After everything you've done?" "I know I've made mistakes," he pleaded. "But I love you, Emma. I love Ava. Give me another chance." For a moment, I saw a flicker of the man I'd fallen in love with, but then I remembered Rachel's words, the years of lies and betrayal. "No, Derek," I said firmly. "It's too late for that." His face darkened. "You don't want to do this, Emma. I can make things very difficult for you." "Are you threatening me?" I asked, my voice steady despite my pounding heart. "I'm just saying, it would be a shame if something happened to your little bakery, or if Ava found out what a vindictive bitch her mother really is." White-hot anger surged through me. "Get out," I hissed. "Now." As Derek turned to leave, a small voice piped up from the doorway. "Mommy? Why is Daddy being mean?" Ava stood there, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. Derek's face paled. "Sweetheart, it's not what you think," he stammered. But Ava backed away, tears welling in her eyes. "You're a bad man," she whispered before running upstairs. Derek looked stricken. "Emma, Save it," I snapped. "You've done enough damage. But let me make one thing clear. If you ever threaten me or Ava again, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man you really are." As Derek slunk out, I sank to the floor, my body shaking with adrenaline and emotion. I'd stood up to him, but at what cost? How could I protect Ava from the fallout? My phone buzzed. A text from Margaret. "Just heard from Derek. Are you okay? Do you need me to come over?" I was about to reply when I noticed something odd. The safe where I kept the bakery's cash was ajar. With trembling hands I opened it, my heart sinking as I realized the truth. It was empty. Every last dollar gone. In that moment, as I stared at the bare safe, Ava's sobs echoing from upstairs, I felt the weight of everything crashing down on me. How could I have been so blind, so trusting? But as I clenched my fists, a new resolve hardened within me. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Derek had taken my money, threatened my daughter, and tried to manipulate me one last time. Now, it was my turn to fight back, and this time, I wouldn't stop until justice was served. The morning sun streamed through the bakery windows as I surveyed the empty shelves. Derek's theft had left me with nothing, but I refused to let it break me. I had one last card to play. "Are you sure about this, Emma?" Margaret asked, her voice laced with concern. I nodded, my jaw set with determination. It's time Derek faced the consequences of his actions. With trembling fingers, I dialed the number Rachel had given me. "Hello? This is Emma Rowland. I have information about Derek Rowland's embezzlement scheme." The next few hours were a whirlwind. Police officers swarmed the bakery, taking statements and collecting evidence. As I watched Derek being led away in handcuffs, a mix of emotions washed over me. Relief, sadness, and a glimmer of hope for the future. Weeks passed, and slowly, life began to take on a new rhythm. The community rallied around me, offering support and encouragement. Margaret, bless her heart, had set up a GoFundMe to help me rebuild the bakery. One particularly busy morning, as I juggled trays of fresh croissants, the bell above the door chimed. I looked up to see a tall, distinguished man with kind eyes. "Emma Rowland?" he asked, smiling warmly. "I'm Robert Weinstein. I heard about your situation and I'd like to help." Robert, it turned out, was a successful restaurateur with a passion for mentoring up-and-coming bakers. Over coffee and my signature cinnamon rolls, we talked for hours about recipes, business strategies, and dreams for the future. As the weeks turned into months, Robert became more than just a mentor. His steady presence and unwavering support helped heal wounds I didn't even know I had. And Ava adored him, often begging him to tell her stories about his travels and culinary adventures. On the day of Derek's sentencing, I stood in the courtroom, my heart pounding. As the judge read out his verdict, guilty on all counts, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It was finally over. Outside the courthouse, surrounded by my parents, Margaret, and Robert, I took a deep breath of fresh air. "So what now?" my mom asked, squeezing my hand. I smiled, looking at the faces of those who had stood by me through it all. "Now, we build something beautiful." And that's exactly what we did. With Robert's guidance and the community's support, my little bakery blossomed into a thriving business. But more importantly, I blossomed too. 1 year to the day after Derek's arrest, I stood in my newly expanded kitchen, putting the finishing touches on a wedding cake. As I piped delicate sugar flowers, I caught sight of my reflection in the polished steel countertop. The woman staring back at me was stronger, wiser, and happier than I'd ever been. "Mommy, look!" Ava's excited voice pulled me from my reverie. She proudly held up a slightly lopsided cupcake, frosted in every color of the rainbow. "I made it all by myself." I scooped her up, planting a kiss on her flour-dusted cheek. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. Just like you." Robert appeared in the doorway, his eyes twinkling. "I'd say you both inherited the baking gene," he chuckled, wrapping us in a warm embrace. As we stood there, flour-covered and laughing, I realized that this moment of pure joy and love was what I'd been fighting for all along. Derek had tried to break me, but instead he'd set me free. Free to find my strength, my voice, and a love that was real and true. I looked at Robert, at Ava, and at the life we were building together. "You know what?" I said, my heart full to bursting. "I think it's time for a celebration. Who wants to help me bake a new beginnings cake?" As Ava cheered and Robert rolled up his sleeves, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The road had been long and painful, but it had led me here, to a place of love, strength, and endless possibilities. And for that, I was grateful. Life, I realized, was a lot like baking. Sometimes you had to endure the heat to create something truly sweet. And this was the sweetest victory of all. I stood in the bathroom, staring at the little pink plus sign on the pregnancy test. My hands trembled as I gripped the sink, a mix of joy and dread washing over me. How would Dane react? I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the conversation ahead. As I stepped into our living room, the sounds of laughter and clinking glasses assaulted my ears. Dane and his friends were already deep into their Friday night revelry. "Honey," I called out, trying to catch his attention over the noise. Dane glanced up from his animated conversation, his eyes slightly glazed. "What's up, babe?" I motioned for him to join me in the kitchen, away from prying ears. He sauntered over, drink in hand, a lopsided grin on his face. "I need to talk to you about something important," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Dane leaned against the counter, taking a swig from his glass. "Can it wait? I'm in the middle of telling the guys about our Aspen trip." I swallowed hard, pushing down the irritation rising in my throat. "No, it can't wait. I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air between us. Dane's eyebrows shot up, and for a moment I thought I saw a flicker of excitement in his eyes, but as quickly as it appeared it vanished. "Oh," he said, his tone flat. "Well, that's unexpected." My heart sank. "Is that all you have to say?" Dane shrugged, glancing back towards the living room. "What do you want me to say, Hannah? We'll deal with it later. Right now, I've got guests to entertain." Before I could respond, he was already heading back to his friends, leaving me alone in the kitchen with my news and my disappointment. I retreated to our bedroom, closing the door on the sounds of merriment. As I sat on the edge of the bed, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Max, Dane's childhood friend. "Hey, Hannah. Everything okay? You looked upset when you left the room." I hesitated before replying, "Just not feeling well. Thanks for asking." A moment later, another message. "Want me to send Dane up?" I sighed, typing back, "No, it's fine. He's busy with the party." There was a long pause before Max's response came through. "You know, if you ever need to talk." I stared at the screen, a lump forming in my throat. Max had always been kind, always noticed when things weren't right. Unlike Dane, a knock at the door startled me. "Hannah?" It was Dane. "The guys want to play poker? Mind if we use the dining room table?" I closed my eyes, counting to 10 before answering. "Sure, go ahead." "Thanks, babe. You're the best," Dane called out, his footsteps already retreating down the hall. I lay back on the bed, one hand resting on my still flat stomach. This wasn't how I'd imagined sharing the news of our first child. In my dreams, there had been joy, excitement, plans for the future. Instead, I got indifference and a poker game. As the night wore on, the noise from downstairs grew louder. Laughter, shouts, the occasional crash of something being knocked over. I tried to block it out, to focus on the miracle growing inside me. But with each passing hour, a realization grew alongside it. This child deserved better. I deserved better. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Max. "I'm heading out. Are you sure you're okay?" This time, I didn't hesitate. "No," I typed. "I'm not okay at all." Weeks passed, and my pregnancy progressed, but life in our house remained unchanged. If anything, Dane's parties grew more frequent and wilder. I found myself constantly cleaning up after his friends, dodging drunken guests, and trying to find moments of peace in my own home. One Saturday morning, I woke to the sound of breaking glass. I rushed downstairs to find Dane and his buddies sprawled across the living room, surrounded by empty bottles and overturned furniture. "Dane," I said, my voice tight with frustration, "we need to talk." He looked up at me, bleary-eyed and confused. "What's the problem, babe?" I gestured around the room. "This. All of this. I'm 4 months pregnant, and our house is a constant disaster zone. We need to make some changes." Dane stumbled to his feet, swaying slightly. "Come on, Hannah. It's just a little fun. Don't be such a buzzkill." His words stung, but I pressed on. "This isn't about fun. It's about responsibility. We're going to be parents soon." One of Dane's friends, a guy named Trevor, piped up from the couch. "Hey, man, maybe she's right. You should listen to your old lady." Dane whirled on him, suddenly angry. "Don't tell me how to handle my wife, Trevor. This is my house, and I'll do what I want." I felt tears pricking at my eyes. "Your house? What about our home, Dane? What about our family?" He waved a dismissive hand. "We've got plenty of time for all that boring family stuff later. Right now, we're young. We should enjoy it while we can." I stood there, stunned by his callousness. As I turned to leave, I caught sight of Max, who had been quietly observing from the corner. His eyes met mine, filled with sympathy and something else I couldn't quite name. Later that afternoon, as I was folding laundry in our bedroom, there was a soft knock at the door. It was Max. "Hey," he said, his voice gentle. "I wanted to check on you. That scene downstairs was pretty rough." I sighed, sinking onto the bed. "I don't know what to do anymore, Max. It's like Dane doesn't even care about the baby or me." Max sat beside me, careful to keep a respectful distance. Have you thought about talking to someone? Maybe a counselor? I shook my head. Dane would never agree to that. He doesn't think there's a problem. What about for yourself then? Max suggested. You need support, Hannah. This isn't healthy for you or the baby. As I considered his words, we heard a commotion from downstairs. Dane's voice rang out, loud and slurred. Hey, everyone, who's up for a pool party? I groaned, burying my face in my hands. I can't do this anymore, Max. I just can't. He placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. You don't have to. Listen, I know it's not my place, but I care about you, Hannah. Both of you, he added, nodding towards my growing belly. If you need a place to stay, to clear your head, my guest room is always open. I looked up at him, surprised by the offer and the warmth in his eyes. For a moment, I allowed myself to imagine a different life, one filled with peace and understanding. But before I could respond, Dane's voice boomed from the hallway. Hannah? Where are you? The guys want to use our bedroom for beer pong. Max's expression hardened. That's it, he muttered, standing up. I'm going to talk some sense into him. As he strode towards the door, a mix of gratitude and fear washed over me. Max, wait, I called out. He paused, looking back at me. What is it? I took a deep breath, my hand resting protectively over my stomach. I think I'm ready to take you up on that offer. I woke up in Max's guest room, the unfamiliar quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos I'd left behind. As I made my way to the kitchen, I heard Max's voice, low and intense. Dane, you need to get your act together. Hannah's pregnant, for God's sake. I froze, listening to Dane's muffled response through the phone. I don't care about your stupid business deals, Max snapped. Your wife needed you, and you chose to party instead. There was a pause, then Max sighed heavily. Fine, just think about what I said, okay? I cleared my throat, announcing my presence. Max spun around, his face softening when he saw me. Hannah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for you to hear that. It's okay, I said, settling into a chair at the kitchen table. Thank you for trying. Max poured me a cup of herbal tea, his movements careful and deliberate. How are you feeling? Honestly, lost, I admitted. I never thought I'd be 5 months pregnant and hiding out at my husband's best friend's house. Max sat across from me, his eyes full of concern. You're not hiding, Hannah. You're protecting yourself and your baby. Just then, the front door burst open. Dane stumbled in, reeking of alcohol and cigarettes. There you are, he slurred, pointing an accusing finger at me. What the hell, Hannah? You can't just leave like that. I stood up, instinctively placing a hand over my swollen belly. Dane, you're drunk. Go home. He lurched forward, but Max stepped between us. Back off, Dane. You're not thinking straight. Dane's face contorted with rage. Oh, I see how it is. You two sneaking around behind my back, huh? It's not like that, I protested, but Dane was beyond reason. He shoved Max hard, sending him stumbling backward. Some friend you are stealing my wife. Max regained his balance, his voice low and dangerous. Nobody's stealing anyone, Dane. Hannah came here because she felt unsafe in her own home, because of you. Dane's eyes widened, a flicker of shame crossing his face before anger took over again. You don't know anything about our marriage. I know enough, Max replied calmly. I know that Hannah deserves better than what you've been giving her. Dane lunged at Max, his fist connecting with Max's jaw. I screamed as the two men grappled, knocking over chairs and slamming into walls. Stop it, I yelled, tears streaming down my face. Both of you, just stop. They froze, chests heaving, staring at each other with a mixture of anger and regret. This is exactly why I left, I said, my voice shaking. I can't live like this anymore, Dane. I won't bring our child into this chaos. Dane's shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him. Hannah, I'm sorry. I'll do better, I promise. I shook my head, years of disappointment and broken promises weighing heavily on me. It's too late for that, Dane. I need more than empty words. Max touched his split lip gingerly, watching us with a guarded expression. What do you want to do, Hannah? I took a deep breath, feeling the baby kick as if in encouragement. I want a divorce. The words hung in the air, heavy with finality. Dane's face crumpled, a mix of shock and despair. You can't mean that, he whispered. We're having a baby. Yes, we are, I said, my resolve strengthening. And that's why I have to do this. Our child deserves better than what we've become. As Dane stumbled out, defeated and dazed, I turned to Max. His eyes met mine, filled with a complex mixture of emotions. What now? He asked softly. I squared my shoulders, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. Now I start over, for me and for my baby. The weeks following my decision to divorce Dane were a whirlwind of emotions and practical challenges. I'd moved back into our house, while Dane stayed with a friend. The silence was both a relief and a reminder of how much had changed. One afternoon, as I sorted through our shared belongings, my phone buzzed with a text from Max. "How are you holding up? Need any help?" I smiled, grateful for his constant support. "I'm okay. Just packing up memories." "Want some company? I can bring coffee and a sympathetic ear." I hesitated, then replied, "That would be nice, thanks." An hour later, Max arrived, 2 steaming cups in hand. As we sat on the living room floor, surrounded by boxes, I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. "I don't know how I would have gotten through this without you, Max," I said softly. He smiled, his eyes warm. "You're stronger than you think, Hannah. You would have found a way." As we talked, I found myself opening up about my fears and hopes for the future. Max listened intently, offering gentle advice and reassurance. "You know," he said, "being a single parent isn't easy, but it's not impossible. Look at me and Sarah, we manage." I nodded, thinking of Max's adorable 5-year-old daughter. "You're an amazing father, Max. I hope I can be half as good a mother." He reached out, squeezing my hand. "You will be, I have no doubt." The moment was interrupted by the sound of a key in the lock. Dane burst in, his eyes wild and bloodshot. "What the hell is this?" he shouted, glaring at our joined hands. I jumped to my feet, heart racing. "Dane, it's not what you think. Max was just helping me pack." Dane sneered, his words slurring slightly. "Oh, I'm sure he was very helpful. Is this why you want a divorce? So you can shack up with my best friend?" Max stood, placing himself between us. "That's enough, Dane. You're drunk and upset. Why don't you go cool off?" Dane lunged forward, shoving Max hard. "Don't tell me what to do in my own house." I stepped back, fear coursing through me. "Dane, please, think about the baby. You're scaring me." His face contorted with rage. "The baby? How do I even know it's mine? Maybe you've been fooling around with Max this whole time." The accusation hit me like a physical blow. "How dare you?" I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. Max's voice was low and dangerous. "You need to leave, Dane. Now." Dane laughed bitterly. "Oh, that's rich. You want me to leave so you can comfort my wife? Fine. You know what? You two deserve each other. Hannah, you want to sleep in the kitchen to make room for your new boyfriend?" The cruel words hung in the air, a reminder of all the times Dane had dismissed my feelings and needs. In that moment, something inside me snapped. "Get out," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Get out of this house and don't come back until you're sober and ready to act like a decent human being." Dane's eyes widened, shocked by my forceful tone. He opened his mouth to argue, but Max stepped forward, his presence imposing. "You heard her, Dane. Leave. Now." For a tense moment, I thought Dane might lash out again, but then his shoulders slumped and he turned away, slamming the door behind him. As the adrenaline faded, I sank onto the couch, shaking. Max sat beside me, careful not to touch me. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. I nodded, then shook my head, then burst into tears. Max hesitated, then pulled me into a comforting hug. As I cried, I realized I couldn't stay in this house anymore. It held too many painful memories, too much of Dane's presence. "Max," I said, pulling away and wiping my eyes, "I need to ask you something important." He looked at me, concern etched on his face. "Anything, Hannah." I took a deep breath. "Do you still have that spare room available?" I sat in Max's guest room, staring at my phone. The number for Dane's Aunt Joan glowed on the screen, my thumb hovering over the call button. I hadn't spoken to her in years, not since Dane had cut ties with her after a heated argument. But I needed her strength now more than ever. Taking a deep breath, I pressed call. "Hello?" Joan's familiar gravelly voice answered. "It's Hannah. I need your help." There was a pause, then, "Hannah, dear, what's wrong?" The dam broke. I poured out everything, the pregnancy, Dane's indifference, the constant parties, and now the impending divorce. Joan listened quietly, only occasionally murmuring words of sympathy. "Oh, honey," she said when I finished, "I'm so sorry you're going through this. Where are you now?" "I'm staying with Max, Dane's friend. I couldn't stay in that house anymore." Joan's voice hardened. "Max, the single father? Hannah, are you sure that's wise?" I felt a flicker of defensiveness. "Max has been nothing but kind and supportive." "I'm sure he has," Joan said, her tone careful. But you're in a vulnerable position, dear. People might talk. Before I could respond, there was a knock at the door. Max poked his head in, his expression troubled. Hannah, Dane's here. He's demanding to see you. My heart raced. Joan, I have to go. Dane's here. Wait, Joan's voice was urgent. Put me on speaker. I want to hear this. Hands shaking, I followed her instructions and walked out to the living room, where Dane stood, looking disheveled and angry. There you are, he sneered. Cozy little setup you've got here with Max. Dane, Max warned, but I held up a hand to stop him. What do you want, Dane? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He laughed bitterly. What do I want? I want my wife back. I want you to stop this ridiculous divorce nonsense and come home. Is that Dane I hear? Joan's voice crackled through the phone speaker. Dane's eyes widened in shock. Aunt Joan, what the hell? Watch your language, young man, Joan snapped. Now, what's this? I hear about you treating your pregnant wife like a doormat? Dane's face flushed with anger. This is none of your business, you old bat. Hannah, hang up the phone. We need to talk privately. I felt a surge of courage, bolstered by Joan's presence, even if only through the phone. No, Dane. I'm done with private talks that go nowhere. You want to talk? Let's talk right here, right now. Fine, he spat. You want to air our dirty laundry? How about we talk about how you've been cozying up to my best friend while I've been working my ass off to provide for our family? Max stepped forward, his jaw clenched. That's enough, Dane. You know that's not true. Oh, defending her honor now, are we? Dane sneered. Both of you, stop it, I shouted, surprising even myself with the force in my voice. This isn't about Max. This is about us, Dane. About how you've ignored me, dismissed my feelings, and turned our home into a frat house. I'm having a baby, your baby, and you can't even be bothered to show up to a single doctor's appointment. The room fell silent, save for Joan's soft, "That's it, girl, let it out." Dane's face crumpled, the anger giving way to something that looked almost like remorse. Hannah, I didn't realize, but I wasn't finished. I've tried, Dane. God knows I've tried. But I can't do this anymore. I won't bring our child into this toxic environment. So that's it? Dane's voice was small. You're just giving up on us? I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt a wave of sadness for what we'd lost. No, Dane, you gave up on us a long time ago. I'm just finally accepting it. As Dane stumbled out, defeated, I turned to Max, who was watching me with a mix of concern and admiration. Hannah, Joan's voice came through the phone, I think it's time you came to stay with me for a while. What do you say? I looked around at Max's cozy home, then down at my swollen belly. It was time for a fresh start, away from all of this. Yes, I said, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. I think that's exactly what I need. I stood on Joan's porch, my heart pounding as I watched Dane's car pull up. It had been 2 weeks since I'd moved in with his aunt, and he'd finally agreed to meet. As he stepped out of the car, I noticed how disheveled he looked. A far cry from his usual polished appearance. Hannah, he said, his voice hoarse, can we talk? Before I could respond, Joan appeared beside me, her presence both comforting and formidable. You can talk right here, Dane. I think we've all had enough of your private conversations. Dane's jaw clenched, but he nodded. Fine. Hannah, I'm sorry. I've been a terrible husband. I want to make things right. I felt a flicker of hope, quickly extinguished by the memory of countless broken promises. How, Dane? How can you possibly make this right? He ran a hand through his unkempt hair. I've stopped drinking. I'm seeing a therapist. I want to be there for you and the baby. Please, just give me another chance. I wavered, torn between my lingering feelings for him and the pain he'd caused. Joan, sensing my hesitation, stepped forward. That's all well and good, Dane, but actions speak louder than words. Why don't you come inside and we can discuss this like adults? As we settled in Joan's living room, the tension was palpable. Dane kept glancing at me, his eyes pleading. Just as Joan was about to speak, the front door burst open. Party's here. A group of Dane's friends stumbled in, clearly drunk. My heart sank as I recognized Trevor, the ringleader of Dane's worst behavior. Dane jumped to his feet, his face pale. Guys, what are you doing here? How did you even know where I was? Trevor laughed, waving his phone. GPS tracking, bro. We couldn't let you face the old ball and chain alone, could we? I felt sick. You've been tracking me? Dane shook his head frantically. No, Hannah, it's not like that. I wanted to make sure you were safe. Joan's voice cut through the chaos like a whip. Everyone who wasn't invited needs to leave. Now. Trevor sneered at her. Who's the old lady? Come on, Dane, ditch these buzzkills and let's go have some real fun. I watched Dane holding my breath. This was it, the moment of truth. Would he choose his friends over his family once again? Dane looked at me, then at his friends, his face a mask of indecision. Guys, I can't. Hannah's pregnant. I need to be here. Trevor rolled his eyes. Pregnant? So what? That doesn't mean your life has to end. Come on, man, don't be whipped. Something in me snapped. I stood up, my voice shaking with fury. Get out! All of you. You've ruined my marriage, my home, and now you're trying to ruin the one chance we have to fix things. Leave. Joan stepped forward, her eyes blazing. You heard the lady. Out, before I call the police. As Trevor and the others shuffled out, grumbling, I turned to Dane. If you walk out that door with them, we're done. For good. Dane looked torn, his gaze flicking between me and his retreating friends. Hannah, choose Dane, I said, my hand resting protectively on my swollen belly. Right now, us or them. The silence stretched, agonizing. Then, to my shock and Joan's visible disgust, Dane took a step towards the door. I'm sorry, he whispered. I can't do this. I'm not ready. As the door closed behind him, I felt something inside me break. Tears streamed down my face as Joan wrapped me in a fierce hug. Oh, honey, she murmured. I'm so sorry, but you're better off without him. I nodded, unable to speak through my sobs. As the sound of Dane's car faded into the distance, I realized with startling clarity that this truly was the end. There was no going back now. What do I do now? I whispered, feeling lost and overwhelmed. Joan's voice was steel and velvet. Now, my dear, we fight. For you, for that baby, and for the life you deserve. Are you ready? I took a deep breath, squaring my shoulders. Yes, I said, surprising myself with the strength in my voice. I'm ready. The next morning I woke with a sense of resolve I hadn't felt in months. Joan was already in the kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee. I'm going back to the house, I announced. I need to get my things and tell Dane it's over. Joan nodded, her eyes sharp. I'm coming with you. As we pulled up to my old home, I felt a mix of dread and determination. The house was eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the constant parties of the past. I unlocked the door. Joan closed behind me. The living room was a disaster. Empty bottles, overturned furniture, and the lingering smell of stale beer. Dane? I called out. No answer. We made our way upstairs, and I froze at the bedroom door. Clothes were strewn everywhere, and there in the middle of our bed was Dane, passed out with a woman I didn't recognize. Oh, honey, Joan whispered, squeezing my shoulder. The pain that shot through me was almost physical, but beneath it, fire of anger began to burn. Dane! I shouted, my voice echoing through the room. He jolted awake, his eyes widening as he took in the scene. Hannah? What are you doing here? The woman beside him stirred, looking confused and embarrassed. I came to get my things, I said, my voice surprisingly steady, and to tell you it's over. I want a divorce. Dane stumbled out of bed, reaching for his pants. Hannah, wait, this isn't, I can explain. Save it, Joan snapped. I think we've seen all we need to see. As I began gathering my belongings, Dane followed me around the room, pleading and making excuses. The woman quietly slipped out, avoiding eye contact. Hannah, please, Dane begged. I made a mistake. I was drunk. I wasn't thinking. I whirled on him, fury coursing through me. A mistake? You've been making mistakes our entire marriage, Dane. I'm pregnant with your child, and you're out partying and sleeping with other women. I'm sorry, he cried. I'll change. I swear. We can work this out. I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. No, we can't. It's too late. As I zipped up my suitcase, Dane's demeanor suddenly changed. His eyes hardened and he grabbed my arm. You can't leave me, he hissed. What about the baby? You can't take my child away. Joan stepped forward, her voice like ice. Let her go, Dane. Now. But Dane was beyond reason. This is all your fault, he shouted at Joan. You turned her against me. No, Dane, I said, wrenching my arm free. You did that all on your own. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Dane lunged at Joan, his face contorted with rage. I screamed, trying to get between them. In the scuffle, I lost my balance, stumbling backwards. I felt a sharp pain as I hit the edge of the dresser, then everything went black. When I came to, I was in a hospital bed, the steady beep of monitors filling the room. Joan sat beside me, her face etched with worry. The baby? I whispered, fear gripping my heart. Joan squeezed my hand. She's okay, you both are. Relief washed over me, followed quickly by a wave of anger and determination. "Where's Dane?" I asked. "In custody," Joan replied. "Assault charges, and—" She hesitated. "Hannah, there's more. The police found drugs in the house, a lot of them." I closed my eyes, feeling a strange mix of shock and vindication. When I opened them again, I met Joan's gaze with steely resolve. "I want those divorce papers drawn up," I said, "and I want full custody." Joan nodded, a fierce pride in her eyes. "You've got it, honey, and I'll be with you every step of the way." As I lay there, one hand resting protectively on my belly, I knew that this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be hard, but for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face it. 6 months after the divorce, I stood in the nursery of my childhood home, gently rocking my newborn daughter, Lily. The soft pink walls and the quiet hum of the mobile were a world away from the chaos of my life with Dane. As I gazed at Lily's peaceful face, my phone buzzed. It was a news alert about Dane's company. With trembling fingers, I opened the article. "Major financial firm implicated in drug scandal," the headline blared. As I read, my heart raced. Dane and several of his closest friends were being investigated for using the company to launder drug money. The parties, the erratic behavior, the drugs found in our house, it all suddenly made horrifying sense. I sank into the rocking chair, clutching Lily close. A knock at the door startled me. "Hannah?" It was Joan. "Have you seen the news?" I nodded, unable to speak. Joan entered, her face a mix of shock and vindication. "Oh, honey," she said, sitting on the ottoman beside me. "How are you feeling?" I took a deep breath. "Relieved," I admitted, surprising myself. "And free." Joan squeezed my hand. "You're stronger than you know, Hannah. You got out just in time." As we sat in companionable silence, my phone rang again. It was Max. "Hannah, I just heard," he said, his voice filled with concern. "Are you okay?" "I am," I replied, realizing it was true. "How are you holding up? I know Dane was your friend." Max sighed. "The Dane I knew died a long time ago. I'm just glad you and Lily are safe." After we hung up, I looked at Joan. "I need to do something. Can you watch Lily for an hour?" She nodded, understanding in her eyes. I drove to the county jail where Dane was being held. As I sat across from him in the visitation room, I barely recognized the man before me. He looked haggard, defeated. "Hannah," he said, his voice hoarse, "I'm so sorry for everything." I met his gaze steadily. "I'm not here for your apology, Dane. I'm here to tell you that Lily and I are going to be fine. We're moving forward, and you need to let us go." Dane's eyes filled with tears. Can I ever see her?" I shook my head. "Not now. Maybe someday when she's older if she wants to, but that's her choice to make, not yours or mine." As I stood to leave, Dane called out, "I did love you, Hannah, in my own messed up way." I paused at the door. "I know, but sometimes love isn't enough. Goodbye, Dane." Driving home, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The future stretched out before me, uncertain but full of possibility. Back in the nursery, I found Joan singing softly to Lily. She looked up as I entered, a knowing smile on her face. "Feel better?" she asked. I nodded, taking Lily into my arms. "I feel ready for whatever comes next." Joan stood, wrapping us both in a warm embrace. "That's my girl. You've got this, Hannah, and you've got us." As the sun set outside, casting a golden glow through the window, I looked down at my daughter, her tiny hand wrapped around my finger, and in that moment, I knew we would be okay. "You and me, little one," I whispered. "We're going to build a beautiful life together." Lily cooed softly, as if in agreement. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hope blooming in my chest. Strong, resilient, and unstoppable. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to face it head on. With Lily in my arms, Joan by my side, and friends like Max to support us, I knew we could weather any storm. As I put Lily to bed that night, I made a silent vow. We would learn from the past, but we wouldn't be defined by it. We would build a life filled with love, laughter, and strength. And most importantly, we would never settle for less than we deserved. The tides had turned, and this time they were carrying us towards a brighter shore. I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, my hands trembling as I gripped the edge of the sink. Mom's words echoed in my head, each one a dagger to my heart. "Jordan, honey, I'm worried about you," she had said over our weekly Sunday brunch. "You're not getting any younger, and I just want to see you settled before." I splashed cold water on my face, trying to wash away the memory of her concerned eyes. At 35, I'd always thought I had plenty of time. But seeing the fear in Mom's face, the unspoken dread of leaving me alone in the world, it shook me to my core. A gentle knock on the door startled me. "Jor, you okay in there?" It was Nicole, my younger sister. I took a deep breath and opened the door. "Yeah, I'm fine." Nicole raised an eyebrow, clearly not buying it. "Mom got to you, didn't she?" I nodded, unable to find the words. "Come on," she said, grabbing my hand. "Let's grab a coffee. You look like you need it." 20 minutes later, we were seated at our favorite cafe, steaming lattes in front of us. Nicole leaned forward, her eyes full of understanding. "Look, I know Mom means well, but you can't let her pressure you into something you're not ready for." I sighed, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. "It's not just that, Nick. You should have seen her face. She's scared, and I can't help but feel like I'm letting her down." "You're not letting anyone down," Nicole insisted. "You have a great career, your own place, you're doing just fine. But what if she's right?" I blurted out. "What if I've been so focused on work that I've missed out on finding someone? What if—" "Stop right there," Nicole cut me off. "You haven't missed out on anything. But if you really want to explore your options, why don't we start small? There's a speed dating event at the community center next week. Why don't you give it a shot?" I nearly choked on my latte. "Speed dating? Are you serious?" Nicole grinned. "Deadly. Come on, what's the worst that could happen?" "I could die of embarrassment," I offered. "Or," she countered, "you could meet someone interesting. At the very least, it'll give Mom something to smile about." I hesitated, but the image of Mom's worried face flashed through my mind again. "Fine," I conceded, "but you owe me big time." "Deal," Nicole said, raising her mug in a mock toast. "Now, let's talk about what you're going to wear." The next week flew by in a blur of work deadlines and increasingly panicked phone calls with Nicole. Before I knew it, I was standing outside the community center, my heart pounding like a jackhammer. "You can do this," I muttered to myself, smoothing down the new dress Nicole had insisted I buy. "It's just a few hours. No big deal." I took a deep breath and pushed open the door. The room was already buzzing with activity, filled with nervous laughter and the clink of glasses. I scanned the crowd, feeling overwhelmed. First time, I turned to find a man about my age smiling at me. He had kind eyes and an easygoing demeanor that immediately put me at ease. "Is it that obvious?" I asked, managing a small laugh. He shrugged. "Takes one to know one. I'm Brad." "Jordan," I replied, shaking his offered hand. "Well, Jordan," he said, gesturing towards the room, "what do you say we face this madness together?" For the first time that evening, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't such a bad idea after all. "Lead the way," I said, following Brad into the crowd, unaware that this simple decision would set in motion a chain of events that would change my life forever. I stood in front of my closet, staring at a sea of muted colors and practical work attire. Nicole's words from our shopping trip yesterday echoed in my mind. "Jordan, you're gorgeous. It's time to let the world see it." With a deep breath, I reached for the vibrant red blouse we'd bought. It felt daring, almost rebellious. As I slipped it on, I caught my reflection in the mirror. For the first time in years, I didn't see a software engineer. I saw a woman. The office was abuzz with energy as I walked in. Heads turned, and I felt a flutter of self-consciousness. "Wow, Jordan!" my colleague Sarah exclaimed. "You look amazing." "What's the occasion?" I felt my cheeks warm. "No occasion, just trying something new." Sarah grinned. "Well, it suits you. You should dress like this more often." As the day progressed, I found myself standing taller, smiling more. The compliments kept coming, each one boosting my confidence a little higher. By lunchtime, I was riding a wave of newfound self-assurance when my phone buzzed. It was Mom. "Jordan, honey," she said, her voice tinged with excitement. "I hope you haven't forgotten about dinner tonight. I've invited the Thompsons. Their son, Mark, is visiting from Chicago. He's a doctor, you know." My stomach dropped. "Mom, we've talked about this. I'm not interested in being set up. But, sweetheart, Mark is such a nice young man. Just give him a chance." "For me?" I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of her expectations. "Fine, Mom, I'll be there." The rest of the day passed in a blur of coding and meetings. As I drove to Mom's house that evening, my earlier confidence began to waver. What was I thinking? Trying to change myself? Mom greeted me at the door, her eyes widening as she took in my appearance. "Oh, Jordan, you look lovely." Before I could respond, she ushered me into the living room where the Thompsons sat with their son. Mark stood up, offering a polite smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Dinner was a painful affair. Mark droned on about his medical practice while Mom beamed at us, clearly envisioning wedding bells. I pushed my food around my plate, feeling more out of place with each passing minute. As Mom cleared the dishes, Mrs. Thompson leaned in. "So, Jordan, do you have any plans to settle down? A career is nice, but there's nothing like having a family." I felt a surge of anger. "Actually, I'm quite happy with my life as it is." The room fell silent. Mom returned, her face a mask of disappointment. "Jordan, why don't you help me in the kitchen?" Once we were alone, she turned to me. "Honey, I'm just trying to help. You're not getting any younger, and—" "Stop it, Mom," I snapped, surprising us both. "I'm tired of you trying to fix me. There's nothing wrong with my life." Tears welled in her eyes. "I just want you to be happy." "I am happy," I insisted, but the words felt hollow. The drive home was a blur of conflicting emotions. As I walked into my apartment, my phone buzzed with a text from Nicole. "How'd it go with Mom's setup?" I sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. "Disaster," I typed back. "I don't know what I'm doing anymore, Nick." Her response was immediate. "Come over tomorrow. I have an idea." The next morning, I found myself at Nicole's doorstep, still feeling raw from the previous night's events. "Okay," Nicole said as soon as I walked in, her eyes gleaming with determination. "We're going to that speed dating event." I groaned. "Nick, I don't think—" "No arguments," she cut me off. "You tried Mom's way, now we're doing this my way." As I looked at my sister's resolute face, I realized I had a choice to make. I could retreat back into my comfortable, predictable life, or I could take a leap into the unknown. With a mix of trepidation and excitement, I nodded. "All right, let's do it." Little did I know that decision would set me on a path that would change everything. The community center buzzed with nervous energy as I stepped inside, my heart pounding. Nicole gave my hand a reassuring squeeze before disappearing into the crowd. I was on my own. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our speed dating event." The coordinator's voice rang out. "You'll have 5 minutes with each partner. When you hear the bell, move to the next table. Ready? Begin." I sat down at my first table, facing a man with a receding hairline and a forced smile. "Hi, I'm Steve," he said, his eyes darting around the room. "Jordan," I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. The next few encounters blurred together, a parade of awkward small talk and feigned interest. By the 4th round, I was ready to bolt. Then I saw him. He was tall, with kind eyes and a genuine smile that put me at ease instantly. As he sat down, I noticed calluses on his hands, a working man's hands. "I'm Brad," he said, his voice warm and deep. "Jordan," I replied, feeling a flutter in my stomach. "So, Jordan," he leaned in, his eyes twinkling, "what brings a beautiful woman like you to a place like this?" I laughed, surprised by his directness. "Would you believe my sister dragged me here?" Brad grinned. "I'd believe it. My buddy did the same to me. Said I needed to get out there." We fell into easy conversation, discussing our jobs, our families, our dreams. Before I knew it, the bell rang. "Time's up," I said, feeling a pang of disappointment. Brad hesitated, then quickly scribbled something on a napkin. "I know we're supposed to wait until the end, but here's my number. I'd love to continue this conversation over coffee sometime." As he moved to the next table, I clutched the napkin, a mix of excitement and trepidation washing over me. The rest of the event passed in a blur. As soon as it ended, I found Nicole waiting by the door. "Well?" she asked, eyebrows raised. I showed her the napkin. "I met someone." Nicole squealed, drawing curious glances. "Details now." We headed to a nearby cafe, where I recounted my meeting with Brad. Nicole listened intently, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "He sounds perfect, Jor," she said. "When are you going to call him?" I hesitated. "I don't know, Nick. What if—" "No what ifs," she cut me off. "You're calling him. Right now." Before I could protest, Nicole had snatched my phone and dialed the number. "It's ringing," she mouthed, handing it back to me. "Hello?" Brad's voice came through the speaker. "Hi, Brad. It's Jordan from the speed dating event." "Jordan, I'm glad you called. I was hoping we could grab that coffee." We made plans for the following evening, and as I hung up, I felt a mix of excitement and terror. The next day, I stood in front of the mirror, scrutinizing my outfit. The red blouse from before felt too bold now. I changed into a soft blue sweater, then back to the red blouse. By the time I settled on an outfit, I was already running late. I rushed to the cafe, my nerves frayed. As I burst through the door, I saw Brad sitting at a corner table, looking up expectantly. Our eyes met, and he smiled that warm smile that had captivated me the night before. "Jordan," he said, standing to greet me, "I was starting to worry you'd changed your mind." "Never," I replied, surprising myself with my boldness. As we sat down, Brad reached across the table and took my hand. "I have a confession to make," he said, his expression serious. "I've never done anything like this before. But there's something about you, Jordan. I can't explain it, but I feel like I've known you my whole life." I felt a lump form in my throat. This was moving fast, too fast. But as I looked into Brad's earnest eyes, I realized I felt the same inexplicable connection. "I feel it too," I whispered. Brad's face lit up, and in that moment I knew my life was about to change forever. What I didn't know was whether that change would lead to happiness or heartbreak. 2 years flew by in a whirlwind of love and laughter. Brad and I had grown closer than I ever thought possible, our lives intertwining like vines. As I stood in front of the mirror on my wedding day, I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. Gone was the hesitant, career-focused Jordan. In her place stood a bride, radiant with joy and hope. "You look beautiful, honey," Mom said, her eyes glistening with tears as she adjusted my veil. I turned to face her, my heart swelling with emotion. "Thank you, Mom, for everything." She pulled me into a tight embrace. "I'm so happy for you, Jordan. Brad is a wonderful man." As we broke apart, a shadow crossed her face. "I just wish his family could be here to share this day." I felt a pang of sadness. Brad's strained relationship with his parents had been a source of tension throughout our engagement. They'd refused to attend the wedding, citing irreconcilable differences with their son's life choices. "We're his family now, Mom," I said, squeezing her hand. "That's all that matters." The ceremony was simple but beautiful. As Brad and I exchanged vows, I felt a sense of completeness I'd never experienced before. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, the small gathering of friends and family erupted in cheers. At the reception, Nicole cornered me by the punch bowl, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "So, Mrs. Bradford," she teased, "how does it feel to be a married woman?" I laughed, still giddy from the day's events. "Honestly, it feels amazing." Nicole's expression softened. "I'm happy for you, Jor. But—" she hesitated, glancing around to ensure we weren't overheard. "Are you sure about Brad? I mean, with his family situation and all." I felt a flicker of annoyance. "Brad can't help his family, Nick. He's a good man." I know," she said, holding up her hands in surrender. "I just worry about you, that's all." Before I could respond, Brad appeared at my side, wrapping an arm around my waist. "Everything okay here, ladies?" I leaned into him, pushing away my doubts. "Everything's perfect." As the night wore on, I found myself watching Brad interact with my family. He was charming, attentive, everything I could have hoped for in a husband. Yet there was a nagging feeling I couldn't shake, a sense that something was off. Later, as we slow danced under the twinkling lights, I voiced my concerns. "Brad, are you sure you're okay with all this? With becoming part of my family?" He pulled back slightly, his brow furrowed. "Of course, Jordan. Why wouldn't I be? It's just, I know how hard it's been with your parents. I don't want you to feel like you're replacing them, or—" Brad cut me off with a kiss. "Your family is my family now," he said firmly. I couldn't be happier. His words should have reassured me, but instead, they sent a chill down my spine. There was an intensity in his eyes that I'd never seen before, a hunger that both thrilled and frightened me. As the reception wound down, Mom pulled me aside for one last moment alone. "Jordan, sweetheart," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "I want you to have this." She pressed a small velvet box into my hands. Inside was a delicate gold locket, clearly an antique. "It's been in our family for generations," Mom explained. "I want you to have it now, to pass on to your own daughter someday." Tears welled in my eyes as I clasped the locket around my neck. "Thank you, Mom. I'll treasure it always." As Brad and I drove away from the reception, waving goodbye to our loved ones, I fingered the locket, lost in thought. I was starting a new chapter of my life, filled with promise and love. But as I glanced at Brad's profile in the dim car light, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was also leaving something behind. A part of myself I might never get back. Little did I know, this day marked not just the beginning of my marriage, but the start of a journey that would test the very foundations of everything I believed about love, family, and myself. The first year of marriage with Brad was like a dream. We settled into a cozy routine, our lives intertwining seamlessly. Every Sunday we'd visit Mom for dinner, and I watched with joy as Brad and Mom grew closer. He'd help her with household repairs, listen to her stories, and even started calling her Mom himself. One Sunday evening, as we were leaving Mom's house, Brad surprised me. "You know, Jordan, I've been thinking," he said, his eyes twinkling. "Maybe it's time we start thinking about having a family of our own." My heart skipped a beat. "Really? You want to have kids?" He nodded, pulling me close. "Seeing you with your mom, it makes me realize what I missed out on. I want to create that kind of love and warmth in our own home." I felt a rush of emotions, excitement, fear, love. "Oh, Brad," I whispered, burying my face in his chest. "I'd love that." The next few months were a whirlwind of planning and dreaming. We turned our spare room into a nursery, painted soft yellow with little ducks on the walls. Mom was over the moon, already knitting tiny booties and blankets. But as the months passed with no positive pregnancy test, the excitement began to wane. I started to feel the pressure, the disappointment in Brad's eyes each time I shook my head. The doctor's visits became more frequent, the tests more invasive. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Bradford," the fertility specialist said one day, her voice gentle, "but it seems you have some complications that may make it difficult for you to conceive naturally." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. Brad squeezed my hand, but I could feel the tension in his grip. That night, as we lay in bed, Brad turned to me. "Jordan, I've been thinking, what if we considered adoption?" I propped myself up on one elbow, studying his face in the dim light. "Adoption? Are you sure?" He nodded, his eyes earnest. "I know it's not what we planned, but think about it. We could give a child a loving home, a family. Isn't that what really matters?" I felt a surge of love for this man who continually surprised me with his compassion. "You're right," I said, leaning in to kiss him. "Let's do it." The adoption process was grueling. Mountains of paperwork, invasive home studies, and endless waiting. But through it all, Brad was my rock. He never wavered, never complained. His dedication only made me love him more. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, we got the call. A baby girl, just 3 months old, needed a home. We rushed to the agency, our hearts pounding with anticipation. The moment they placed her in my arms, I knew. This was our daughter. I looked up at Brad, tears streaming down my face, and saw the same emotion mirrored in his eyes. "She's perfect," he whispered, gently stroking her cheek. We named her Lily, after my grandmother. As we brought her home, I felt a sense of completeness I'd never experienced before. Our little family was whole. The next few weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and endless diaper changes. But through it all, Brad was there, changing diapers, singing lullabies, and making midnight formula runs. One night, as I watched Brad gently rock Lily to sleep, I felt a twinge of unease. He was so perfect, so devoted. It almost seemed too good to be true. "Brad," I said softly, not wanting to wake Lily, "are you really okay with all this? With adopting, I mean. It's not what we originally planned." He looked up at me, his eyes shining with an intensity that took my breath away. "Jordan, this is everything I've ever wanted. You, Lily, our family. I wouldn't change a thing." His words should have reassured me, but instead they sent a chill down my spine. There was something in his voice, a desperation I'd never heard before. As he turned back to Lily, cooing softly, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Brad's devotion than met the eye. Little did I know, this moment of doubt was just the beginning. The foundation of our perfect life was about to be shaken to its core, and I would soon face a decision that would change everything. The call came at 3 a.m., jolting me from a fitful sleep. Mom's neighbor, Mrs. Caldwell, her voice trembling, told me Mom had collapsed. By the time Brad and I reached the hospital, Mom was already in the ICU. "Stroke," the doctor said, his face grim. "The next 24 hours are critical." I felt the world tilt beneath my feet. Brad's arm around my waist was the only thing keeping me upright. "She'll pull through," he whispered. "Your mom's a fighter." But as the hours ticked by, hope dwindled. Mom's condition deteriorated rapidly. By nightfall, the doctor's expression had changed from grim to defeated. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "There's nothing more we can do." The words hit me like a physical blow. I crumpled into Brad's arms, my body racked with sobs. This couldn't be happening. Not Mom. Not now. As we entered Mom's room, the steady beep of machines filled the air. She looked so small, so fragile in that hospital bed. I took her hand, cold and limp, in mine. "Mom," I choked out. "Please don't leave me." Her eyes fluttered open, focusing on me with effort. "Jordan," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "My sweet girl." I leaned in close, drinking in every word. "I'm here, Mom. I'm right here." She squeezed my hand weakly. "Be happy, sweetheart. That's all I ever wanted for you." Her eyes drifted to Brad, standing silently behind me. "Take care of her," she murmured. Brad nodded solemnly. "I promise, Mom, with everything I have." Mom's lips curved into a faint smile. Then with a soft sigh, she closed her eyes. The machines wailed as her heart stopped beating. The next few days passed in a blur of grief and exhaustion. Brad took charge of the funeral arrangements, handling everything with quiet efficiency. I moved through the motions like a ghost, barely able to function. The day of the funeral dawned bright and clear, a cruel contrast to the darkness in my heart. As I stood before the mirror, struggling to fasten the clasp of Mom's locket, Brad appeared behind me. "Let me," he said gently, his fingers deftly securing the necklace. I met his eyes in the reflection. "I don't know how to do this," I whispered. "How to live without her." Brad turned me to face him, his hands on my shoulders. "You're not alone, Jordan. I'm here. We'll get through this together." At the cemetery, I clutched Brad's hand like a lifeline as they lowered Mom's casket into the ground. Nicole stood on my other side, her daughter Maya pressed close to her leg. As people began to disperse, Brad squeezed my hand. "I'll give you a moment alone," he said, moving away. I knelt by the fresh mound of earth, tears streaming down my face. "I'm sorry, Mom," I whispered. "I'm sorry I didn't spend more time with you. I'm sorry for all the things I never said." A hand on my shoulder startled me. I looked up to see Nicole, her eyes red-rimmed but determined. "She knew, Jor," she said softly. "Mom knew how much you loved her." As we walked back to the car, I noticed Brad deep in conversation with the funeral director. Their hushed tones and serious expressions sent a chill down my spine. "Everything okay?" I asked as Brad rejoined us. He nodded, a bit too quickly, "Just finalizing some details." That night, as I lay sleepless in bed, I heard Brad's voice from downstairs. He was on the phone, speaking in low, urgent tones. "Need to move quickly." I caught snippets of his conversation. "Before she suspects anything." My heart began to race. What was Brad up to? And why did I have the sinking feeling it had something to do with Mom's death? As I lay there, my mind spinning with questions and suspicions, I realized that my grief was slowly giving way to something else. A determination to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Little did I know, the path I was about to embark on would shatter everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, and the man I had chosen to spend my life with. The weeks following Mom's funeral were a blur of grief and paperwork. Brad had been my rock, handling everything from the estate lawyers to the endless stream of well-wishers. But as the fog of sorrow began to lift, I noticed something off about his behavior. It started with little things. Hushed phone calls that abruptly ended when I entered the room, furtive glances at his phone during dinner. But it was the day I caught him rifling through Mom's old files that my suspicions crystallized into something more sinister. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Brad jumped, guilt flashing across his face before he smoothed it into a sympathetic smile. "Just organizing some papers for the lawyer, honey. Don't worry about it." But I did worry. That night, I lay awake, my mind racing. When Brad's phone buzzed with a late-night text, I made a decision that would change everything. The next morning, I waited until Brad left for work before sneaking into his home office. My hands shook as I booted up his computer, feeling like a thief in my own home. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. A series of emails with a local real estate appraiser. My blood ran cold as I read the messages. Brad had been secretly getting Mom's house appraised. But why? We had agreed to keep it in the family, a place for Nicole and her daughter to live. Suddenly, a noise from downstairs made me jump. Brad's voice called out, "Jordan, you home?" Panic surged through me. I quickly closed the emails and shut down the computer, my heart pounding so loud I was sure Brad would hear it. Up here, I called back, trying to keep my voice steady. Just tidying up a bit. That evening, over a dinner I could barely stomach, I decided to confront him. Brad, I began, setting down my fork. I need to ask you something. He looked up, his expression guarded. What is it, honey? Why did you have Mom's house appraised? The color drained from his face. For a moment, he looked like a deer caught in headlights. Then his features hardened. How did you find out about that? It doesn't matter, I said, my voice trembling. What matters is why you did it behind my back. Brad's jaw clenched. I was trying to protect you, Jordan. We need to think about our future, about Lily's future. That house is worth a lot of money. Protect me? I echoed, disbelief coloring my tone. By going behind my back? By betraying my trust? Don't be so dramatic, Brad snapped. It's just business. Your mother would have wanted us to be financially secure. His words hit me like a physical blow. My mother would have wanted us to honor her wishes, I shot back. She wanted that house to stay in the family, for Nicole and Maya. Brad's eyes flashed with anger. And what about our family? What about Lily? Don't we deserve a better life? Not at the expense of my sister and niece, I shouted, rising from my chair. God, Brad, I don't even recognize you anymore. What happened to the man I married? He grew up, Brad snarled. He realized that in this world you have to look out for yourself. As we glared at each other across the dinner table, I felt something inside me break. This wasn't the man I had fallen in love with. This wasn't the life I had envisioned for us. I want you out, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Pack your things and leave now. Brad's face contorted with rage. You can't do this. You have no idea what you're getting into. As he stormed out of the room, his last words sent a chill down my spine. What did he mean? What else was he hiding? That night, as I lay alone in our bed, I made a vow. I would uncover the truth, no matter how ugly it might be. For Mom's memory, for Nicole and Maya, and for my own peace of mind, I would get to the bottom of Brad's deception. Little did I know, the truth would be far more devastating than I could have ever imagined. The truth hit me like a freight train. As I sat in the lawyer's office, staring at the documents spread before me, I felt my world crumbling around me. Brad, the man I had loved and trusted, had been living a lie. I'm sorry, Mrs. Bradford, the lawyer said gently, but it appears your husband has accrued a significant gambling debt over the past few years. He's been using your mother's house as collateral. My hands shook as I leafed through the papers. Hundreds of thousands of dollars, borrowed against Mom's home. Our home. The home that was supposed to be a safe haven for Nicole and Maya. How? I choked out. How could he do this? The lawyer's sympathetic gaze did nothing to ease the pain. I'm afraid it gets worse. There's evidence that Mr. Bradford may have, hastened your mother's passing to gain access to the property sooner. The room spun. I gripped the edge of the desk, fighting the urge to be sick. Brad hadn't just betrayed me. He'd betrayed Mom's memory, her trust in him. And for what? For money to fuel his addiction? I left the office in a daze, my mind reeling. As I drove home, a cold determination settled over me. This ends now, I thought. Brad was waiting when I got home, his face a mask of false concern. Where have you been, honey? I've been worried sick. I looked at him, really looked at him, and wondered how I had ever been so blind. It's over, Brad, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. I know everything. His facade crumbled instantly. Jordan, I can explain. Explain what? I cut him off. How you gambled away our future. How you used my mother's house as your personal piggy bank. Or maybe you'd like to explain how you hastened her death. Brad's face went pale. That's not true. I loved your mother. I would never... Save it, I spat. I want you out of this house and out of my life. Now. As Brad packed his things, casting desperate glances my way, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. This wasn't the end I had envisioned for us, but it was the end we deserved. Once he was gone, I called Nicole. Can you come over? I asked, my voice breaking. And bring Maya. I need you both. An hour later, we sat around Mom's old kitchen table, the same one where we'd shared so many family dinners. I told them everything. Brad's betrayal, the gambling, the threats to our home. Nicole reached across the table, squeezing my hand. Oh, Jor, she whispered. I'm so sorry. Maya, wise beyond her years, looked up at me with determination in her eyes. We'll fix this, Aunt Jordan, together. Looking at their faces, my sister, my niece, my family, I felt a surge of strength. "You're right," I said. "We will fix this. This is our home, and no one is going to take it from us." Over the next few weeks, we formulated a plan. I threw myself into work, taking on extra projects to boost our income. Nicole started a small business from home, selling her handmade crafts online. Even Maya pitched in, offering to tutor younger kids in the neighborhood. It wasn't easy. There were nights when the weight of it all felt crushing. But every morning, I'd wake up to the sound of Nicole humming in the kitchen or Maya's laughter echoing through the halls, and I knew we were going to make it. 6 months later, we gathered around that same kitchen table. But this time, instead of bad news, we were celebrating. We had done it. We had paid off Brad's debts and saved our home. As I looked around at the faces of my true family, I felt Mom's presence stronger than ever. I fingered the locket around my neck, the one she had given me on my wedding day. "We did it, Mom," I whispered. "We kept your home. We kept our family together." Nicole raised her glass. "To Mom," she said, her eyes glistening. "And to us." "To us," Maya and I echoed. In that moment, I realized that sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the family you're born into. Brad had betrayed us, but he had also unwittingly given us a gift, the chance to discover our own strength, our resilience, our love for each other. As we laughed and talked late into the night, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. This was home. This was family. And no matter what challenges lay ahead, I knew we would face them together. I smoothed my dress for the 100th time, fussing with the neckline as I surveyed the dining room. Everything had to be perfect for Thomas's celebration dinner. The promotion he'd worked so hard for had finally come through, and I wanted this night to be special. "Vivian, honey, have you seen my blue tie?" Thomas called from upstairs. "Check the second drawer, dear," I replied, lighting the candles on the table. The flickering flames cast a warm glow across the china plates and crystal glasses. I smiled, remembering our wedding day when we'd received this set as a gift. 10 years had flown by in the blink of an eye. Thomas's footsteps on the stairs pulled me from my reverie. He appeared in the doorway, looking dashing in his tailored suit. "You look beautiful," he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he smiled. I felt a blush creep up my cheeks. Even after all these years, he still had that effect on me. "You clean up pretty well yourself, Mr. Vice President," I teased, straightening his tie. He chuckled, pulling me close. "I couldn't have done it without you, Viv. You've been my rock through it all." The doorbell chimed, interrupting our moment. "That'll be Sam and Jack," I said, giving Thomas a quick peck on the cheek before heading to answer the door. Samantha, my best friend since college, greeted me with a warm hug. "Congratulations, you two," she exclaimed, handing me a bottle of champagne. Her husband, Jack, nodded in agreement, clapping Thomas on the back as they made their way inside. As we settled around the table, the conversation flowed easily. We laughed over shared memories and toasted to new beginnings. It wasn't until dessert that I noticed something was off. Thomas's phone buzzed on the table, and he glanced at it, a small smile playing on his lips. "Everything okay?" I asked, curious about what could be so engaging. "Oh, just work stuff," he replied, tucking the phone away. But I caught the way his eyes lit up, a spark I hadn't seen in a while. Sam must have noticed too, because she shot me a questioning look. I shrugged it off, determined not to let anything dampen the evening. As our guests were leaving, Sam pulled me aside. "Viv, is everything all right with you and Thomas?" she whispered, concern etched on her face. "Of course," I replied, perhaps a bit too quickly. "Why do you ask?" She hesitated. "It's probably nothing, but Jack mentioned that Thomas has been spending a lot of time with his new mentee at work. Elizabeth, I think her name is?" My stomach clenched. "I'm sure it's just part of his new responsibilities," I said, forcing a smile. But Sam's words had planted a seed of doubt that I couldn't shake. Later that night, as Thomas and I cleaned up, I couldn't help but ask, "So, how's the mentoring going? With Elizabeth, right?" Thomas's hand paused mid-wipe of a plate. "It's fine," he said, his tone suddenly guarded. "She's bright, catches on quickly." "That's good," I replied, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Maybe we should have her over for dinner sometime. I'd love to meet her." Thomas's response was oddly terse. "I don't think that's necessary, Viv. It's just work." As I lay in bed that night, Thomas's arm draped over me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. The seed of doubt Sam had planted began to grow, and I found myself wondering what other changes this promotion might bring to our lives. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a storm that would shake the very foundation of our marriage. The weeks following Thomas's promotion flew by in a whirlwind of late nights and business dinners. I tried to ignore the nagging feeling in my gut, but it grew harder with each passing day. Thomas's phone buzzed constantly, and his eyes lit up every time he checked it. One evening, as I was folding laundry, Thomas's phone chimed on the nightstand. I hesitated for a moment before glancing at the screen. A message from Elizabeth flashed across it. "Can't wait for our lunch tomorrow. You always brighten my day." My heart sank. I placed the phone back, my hands trembling slightly. When Thomas came home that night, I couldn't help but confront him. "How was work?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Busy as usual," he replied, loosening his tie. "Got a big presentation coming up." "And how's Elizabeth doing? I saw her message about lunch tomorrow." Thomas froze for a split second before recovering. "Oh, that? It's just a mentoring lunch. Nothing to worry about, Viv." But I could see the guilt flickering in his eyes. "Thomas, be honest with me. Is there something going on between you two?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Of course not. She's just a colleague. You're being paranoid, Vivian." His dismissive tone stung. "Paranoid, Thomas, you light up every time her name is mentioned. I'm not blind." "Don't be ridiculous," he snapped. "I'm not some hormonal teenager. I can have female friends without it meaning anything." I felt tears pricking at my eyes. "Friends don't make their spouses feel like this, Thomas." He stormed out of the room, leaving me alone with my thoughts and fears. The next day, I couldn't concentrate at work. My mind kept wandering to Thomas and Elizabeth, imagining their lunch together. When I got home, I found Thomas in his study, engrossed in his laptop. "How was your day?" I asked, leaning against the doorframe. He barely looked up. "Fine. Busy." "And lunch with Elizabeth?" This time he did look up, irritation clear on his face. "It was just lunch, Vivian. Drop it." But I couldn't. "You used to tell me about your day, about the people you work with. Now it's like pulling teeth to get any information out of you." Thomas slammed his laptop shut. "Maybe because you turn everything into an interrogation. I'm trying to focus on my career, Vivian. I thought you'd be supportive." "I am supportive," I protested, "but not at the expense of our marriage." He stood up abruptly. "I need some air," he muttered, brushing past me. I heard the front door slam a few moments later. Sinking into his chair, I noticed a post-it note on his desk. In neat handwriting it read, "Elizabeth, dinner reservations Friday 8 p.m. My world tilted on its axis. Dinner reservations? On a Friday night? This was more than mentoring. With shaking hands, I picked up my phone and dialed Sam's number. "Viv, what's wrong?" Sam's concerned voice came through. "It's Thomas," I choked out. I think he's having an affair with Elizabeth." There was a pause on the other end. "Oh, honey, I was hoping I was wrong, but I've heard rumors at the office." My heart shattered. "What do I do, Sam?" "First, take a deep breath," she said gently. "We'll figure this out together. Why don't you come over? Jack's out of town, and I think you could use a friend right now." As I hung up, I caught sight of our wedding photo on the bookshelf. Thomas's smiling face mocked me. How had we gone from that happy couple to this? And more importantly, what was I going to do about it? With a heavy heart, I grabbed my keys and headed for Sam's house, leaving behind the shattered remains of my once perfect life. I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, noticing the fine lines around my eyes that seemed to have deepened overnight. The weight of Thomas's betrayal hung heavy on my shoulders, aging me beyond my years. As I applied concealer to hide the dark circles under my eyes, I couldn't help but wonder if this was why Thomas had turned to Elizabeth. The sound of the front door closing jolted me from my thoughts. Thomas was home. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation I knew was coming. "Vivian?" Thomas called out. "We need to talk." I stepped out of the bathroom, my heart pounding. "Yes, we do." Thomas was standing in the living room, his suit jacket draped over the back of a chair. He looked tired, but there was a strange energy about him. "I think we should discuss what's been going on," he said, his voice unnaturally calm. "You mean your affair with Elizabeth?" The words came out sharper than I intended. He flinched. It's not an affair, Vivian, but I can't deny that there's something there. I felt my world crumbling around me. Something there? Thomas, you're married. To me, remember? He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in his gesture. Of course I remember. But Vivian, when was the last time we really connected? When was the last time you showed any interest in my work, my ambitions? His words hit me like a slap. I've always supported you, Thomas. I've been here, by your side, through everything. But that's just it, he said, his voice rising. You've been here, but have you really been present? Elizabeth, she understands me. She's passionate about her career, about making a difference. When I'm with her, I feel alive. Each word was a dagger to my heart. And with me, you feel, what? Dead? Thomas sighed. That's not what I meant. It's just... Elizabeth is so vibrant, so full of life. She reminds me of you when we first met. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So because I'm not in my 20s anymore, I'm no longer good enough for you? That's not fair, Vivian, Thomas protested. It's not about age. It's about connection, about shared goals and interests. And what about our shared life, Thomas? Our history, our plans for the future. My voice cracked with emotion. He looked away, unable to meet my eyes. I don't know if those plans fit who I am anymore, Viv. I'm changing, growing. Elizabeth challenges me in ways I never expected. I felt a surge of anger. And I don't challenge you? Is that what you're saying? You used to, he said softly. But lately it feels like we're just going through the motions. Elizabeth makes me feel alive again. I couldn't hold back the tears any longer. So what are you saying, Thomas? That you want to leave me for her? He hesitated, and in that moment of silence, I knew, my world shattered completely. I don't know what I want, he finally said, but I can't ignore these feelings anymore. I stood there, frozen, as the reality of our situation crashed over me. This wasn't just a fleeting infatuation or a midlife crisis. This was the end of everything I thought we had built together. I think you should leave, I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. Thomas looked shocked. Vivian, No, I cut him off. I can't do this right now. I need time to think, to process. Please, just go. He nodded slowly, grabbing his jacket. As he reached the door, he turned back. I'm sorry, Viv. I never meant for this to happen. The door closed behind him, and I collapsed onto the couch, sobs racking my body. How had we come to this? And more importantly, where did we go from here? As the tears subsided, a new emotion began to take root, determination. If Thomas thought he could just throw away our marriage for a younger model, he had another thing coming. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The days after Thomas left were a blur of tears and sleepless nights. I threw myself into work, desperate for any distraction from the gaping hole in my life. But even at the hospital, surrounded by the constant bustle of patients and colleagues, I couldn't escape the crushing weight of betrayal. It was during a particularly grueling shift that I received the text that would change everything. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I ducked into the break room to check it. Thomas, we need to talk. I'm moving out. Can I come by tonight to get some things? My hands shook as I read the message. This was really happening. He was leaving me for her. I managed to finish my shift, though I couldn't tell you a single thing I did. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions, anger, grief, and a growing sense of determination. By the time I got home, I had made up my mind. I wouldn't let Thomas see me broken. The doorbell rang at 7 p.m. sharp. I took a deep breath and opened the door. Thomas stood there, looking uncomfortable. Hi, Viv. Can I come in? I stepped aside wordlessly, letting him enter. He glanced around the living room, his eyes lingering on the empty spaces where his things used to be. I've already packed most of your stuff, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. It's in boxes in the spare room. He looked surprised. Oh, thanks, I guess. An awkward silence fell between us. This man, who I had loved for over a decade, now felt like a stranger in our home. So, I finally said, you're really doing this? Throwing away our marriage for her? Thomas sighed. Vivian, it's not like that. Elizabeth and I, we connect on a level that you and I haven't in years. Something inside me snapped. Don't you dare try to justify this, Thomas. You made vows to me, for better or worse, remember? Or does that not apply when a younger, shinier model comes along? That's not fair, he protested. I didn't plan for this to happen, but I can't deny my feelings anymore. I laughed bitterly. Your feelings? What about my feelings, Thomas? Did you even consider them for a second? He had the decency to look ashamed. Of course I did. This isn't easy for me either, Viv. Oh, I'm sure it's so hard for you, I spat. Poor Thomas, torn between his loyal wife and his exciting new girlfriend. However will you cope? Vivian, please, he pleaded. Can't we do this civilly? I felt a surge of rage. Civilly? You want me to be civil while you destroy everything we've built together? While you humiliate me in front of our friends, our families? Thomas's face hardened. I didn't come here to fight. I'll get my things and go. As he turned towards the spare room, something in me broke. She doesn't love you, you know, I blurted out. He froze. What? Elizabeth, I said, my voice shaking. She doesn't love you. She's using you to advance her career. Thomas whirled around, his face a mix of anger and confusion. You don't know what you're talking about. Elizabeth and I know exactly what I'm talking about, I interrupted. I've heard things, Thomas, from people at your company. She has a reputation for latching on to successful men to climb the corporate ladder. I saw doubt flicker in his eyes, quickly replaced by anger. You're lying. You're just jealous because she's younger, more vibrant. More vibrant, I echoed, incredulous. Is that what this is about? You're having a midlife crisis and I'm just collateral damage? Thomas's face flushed. You know what? I don't have to listen to this. I'm leaving. As he stormed towards the door, I called after him. Go ahead, Thomas. Run to your precious Elizabeth, but don't come crawling back when you realize what a mistake you've made. The door slammed behind him, leaving me alone in the echoing silence of our once happy home. I sank to the floor, my body shaking with sobs. But as the tears subsided, a new feeling emerged, a steely resolve. If Thomas thought he could discard me so easily, he had another thing coming. It was time to fight for what was mine, and heaven help anyone who stood in my way. The morning after Thomas left, I woke up with a newfound determination. I couldn't just sit around and let my life fall apart. I needed answers, and I knew exactly where to start. I called in sick to work for the first time in years and dialed Sam's number. Sam, I need your help, I said as soon as she picked up. Can you meet me for coffee? An hour later, we were seated in a quiet corner of our favorite cafe. Sam's face was etched with concern. Viv, honey, how are you holding up? I took a deep breath. I'm managing, but I need to know more about Elizabeth. You work with her, right? Sam nodded, her expression turning guarded. I do, but Viv, are you sure you want to go down this road? I have to, Sam. I need to understand what's really going on. She sighed, then leaned in closer. All right, but you didn't hear this from me. Elizabeth, she has a reputation at the office. This isn't the first time she's gotten close to a senior executive. My heart raced. What do you mean? Last year, she was mentored by the CFO. He left his wife, but a few months later, Elizabeth moved on to greener pastures. The poor guy's career never recovered. I felt a mix of vindication and dread. So she's using Thomas? Sam nodded grimly. It looks that way. But Viv, there's more. I overheard her on the phone yesterday. She was talking to someone, I think her boyfriend, about a big promotion coming her way. My world tilted on its axis. Boyfriend? Are you sure? Pretty sure. She was talking about weekend plans and using pet names. It definitely wasn't Thomas she was talking to. I sat back, my mind reeling. Thomas wasn't just leaving me. He was being played for a fool. What are you going to do? Sam asked softly. I squared my shoulders. I'm going to fight for my marriage. The next few days were a whirlwind. I threw myself into uncovering everything I could about Elizabeth. I scoured social media, called in favors from mutual acquaintances, and even hired a private investigator. What I discovered left me feeling sick. Elizabeth had a long-term boyfriend who worked at a competing firm. Their social media was full of loved-up photos and plans for the future. Meanwhile, she was stringing Thomas along, using him to secure a major promotion. I was mulling over this information when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Thomas. Can we talk? I've been doing some thinking. My heart leaped. Was he having second thoughts? I quickly replied, agreeing to meet him at our favorite park the next day. As I approached our usual bench, I saw Thomas already seated, looking haggard and conflicted. He stood when he saw me, his eyes searching my face. Vivian, he began, his voice hoarse. I've made a terrible mistake. I felt a surge of hope, quickly tempered by caution. What do you mean, Thomas? He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache. I've been blind, Viv. Elizabeth, she's not who I thought she was. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. I know about her boyfriend, Thomas, and her history with executives at the company. His face crumpled. You knew? Why didn't you tell me? Would you have believed me? I asked softly. He looked away, shame written across his features. I don't know. I've been such a fool, Viv. Can you ever forgive me? I stood there, my emotions warring within me. Part of me wanted to take him in my arms, to forgive and forget. But another part, a stronger part, held back. I don't know, Thomas, I said finally. You've hurt me deeply. You were ready to throw away our entire life together for a woman you barely knew. I know, he whispered. I'll do anything to make it right, Viv. Please, just tell me what I need to do. As I looked at him, broken and pleading, I realized I had a choice to make. Did I want to try and salvage our marriage, or was it time to walk away and start anew? The decision I made in that moment would shape the rest of my life. And as the weight of it settled on my shoulders, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. I stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror, steeling myself for what was about to come. After days of internal struggle, I had made a decision that would change everything. I was going to confront Elizabeth face to face. The cafe where we agreed to meet was bustling with the lunch crowd. I spotted Elizabeth immediately, her perfectly coiffed hair and designer outfit standing out among the sea of office workers. As I approached, she looked up, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. "Vivian," she said, her voice cool and composed. "I must admit, I was surprised when you reached out." I slid into the seat across from her, my heart pounding. "Thank you for meeting me, Elizabeth. I think we have a lot to discuss." She raised an eyebrow. "Do we? I was under the impression that your situation with Thomas was resolved." I took a deep breath, fighting to keep my voice steady. "That's exactly why I'm here. I know about your boyfriend, Elizabeth, and your history with executives at the company." For a split second, her carefully crafted facade cracked. Fear flashed in her eyes before she regained her composure. "I'm not sure what you're implying, Vivian." "I think you know exactly what I'm implying," I said, leaning forward. "You've been using Thomas to advance your career, haven't you? Just like you did with the CFO last year." Elizabeth's face hardened. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" I pulled out my phone, showing her the photos my private investigator had taken of her with her boyfriend. "Care to explain these?" She stared at the images, her face paling. "How did you?" "It doesn't matter," I cut her off. "What matters is that you've been playing with people's lives, Elizabeth. With my life." To my surprise, Elizabeth's shoulders sagged. For the first time, I saw a glimpse of vulnerability behind her polished exterior. "You don't understand," she said softly. "This job, this career, it's all I have. I've had to fight tooth and nail for every opportunity." "By destroying marriages?" I asked incredulously. She looked away. "I never meant for it to go this far with Thomas. He wouldn't take no for an answer. I thought if I played along, I could secure the promotion and then let him down gently." I felt a surge of anger. "Let him down gently? Do you have any idea what you've done to our marriage?" Elizabeth met my gaze, her eyes surprisingly sincere. "I'm sorry, Vivian. Truly. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I didn't know how to get out of it without jeopardizing everything I've worked for." As I sat there processing her words, I realized something. Elizabeth wasn't the villain I had painted her to be. She was just a woman trying to navigate a cutthroat world, making questionable choices along the way. "What are you going to do now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Elizabeth sighed. "I don't know. If this gets out, my career is over. But I can't keep living this lie." In that moment, I made a decision that surprised even me. "I won't expose you, Elizabeth," I said. "But you need to come clean to Thomas. He deserves to know the truth." She nodded, relief washing over her face. "I will, I promise." As we parted ways, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, but it was quickly replaced by a new burden. Now that I knew the truth, what was I going to do about my marriage? I drove home in a daze, my mind racing. When I pulled into our driveway, I saw Thomas's car. He was waiting for me on the porch, his face etched with concern and hope. As I walked towards him, I realized that this was it, the moment that would define our future. With each step, I felt the weight of our history, the pain of betrayal, and the faint glimmer of possibility. "Vivian," Thomas said, his voice breaking, "can we talk?" I took a deep breath, knowing that whatever I said next would change everything. The future of our marriage hung in the balance, and the decision was mine to make. I stood on the porch facing Thomas, my heart pounding in my chest. The weight of everything we'd been through, everything I'd learned, pressed down on me like a physical force. "Yes, Thomas, we need to talk," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. We moved inside, the familiar surroundings of our home now feeling alien and tense. Thomas sat on the edge of the couch, his posture rigid with anxiety. "Vivian, I've made a terrible mistake," he began, his voice cracking. "I don't know what I was thinking. Elizabeth, she—" I held up a hand, cutting him off. "I know about Elizabeth, Thomas. I know everything." His eyes widened in shock. "What do you mean?" "I mean I know about her boyfriend, her history with executives at the company, her using you for a promotion," I said, each word deliberate and heavy. Thomas's face crumpled, a mix of shame and disbelief washing over him. How did you find out?" "It doesn't matter," I replied, feeling a surge of strength. "What matters is that I know, and now you know too." He buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. "God, Vivian, I've been such a fool. Can you ever forgive me?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I had to say next. "Forgiveness isn't the issue here, Thomas. The issue is trust. You were ready to throw away our entire marriage, our life together, for a fantasy." "I know," he whispered, looking up at me with tear-filled eyes. "I'll do anything to make it right. Please, Viv, just tell me what I need to do." For a moment, I was tempted. The familiar pull of our shared history, the comfort of the known, tugged at my heart. But then I remembered the pain, the betrayal, the casual cruelty of his comparisons between Elizabeth and me. "I'm sorry, Thomas," I said, my voice soft but firm. "But I don't think there's anything you can do. I've made my decision." He looked at me, confusion and fear dawning on his face. What do you mean?" I squared my shoulders, drawing on a well of strength I didn't know I possessed. "I want a divorce, Thomas." The words hung in the air between us, heavy and final. Thomas stared at me, shock written across his features. "Divorce?" he echoed, his voice barely above a whisper. "Vivian, please, we can work this out. I love you." I shook my head, feeling a strange mix of sadness and liberation. "It's not about love anymore, Thomas. It's about respect, self-respect. And I've realized that I can't stay in a marriage where that's been so fundamentally broken." But what about our life together? Our plans?" he stammered, desperation creeping into his voice. "Those plans were for a different Vivian and Thomas," I replied. "We're not those people anymore." As the reality of the situation sank in, Thomas's demeanor changed. Desperation gave way to anger. "You can't do this," he said, his voice rising. "You're throwing away years of marriage over one mistake." I stood my ground, unflinching. "It wasn't just one mistake, Thomas. It was a series of choices that showed me exactly where I stood in your life, and I deserve better." "You'll regret this," he spat, jumping to his feet. "You're nothing without me, Vivian. Who do you think you are?" His words, meant to hurt and diminish, instead filled me with a fierce determination. "I'm Vivian," I said, my voice strong and clear, "and I'm more than enough on my own." Thomas stormed out, slamming the door behind him. As the echo faded, I sank onto the couch, the enormity of what had just happened washing over me. Tears came then, a mix of grief for what was lost and relief for what was to come. As I sat there in the quiet of the house that had once been our home, I realized that this wasn't just the end of my marriage. It was the beginning of a new chapter in my life. A chapter where I, Vivian, would be the author of my own story. The road ahead would be challenging, I knew. But for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face whatever came next. Because now I was fighting for myself. 1 year after I asked Thomas for a divorce, I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my new blazer. The woman staring back at me was different from the one who had once defined herself as Thomas's wife. She was stronger, more confident, and unapologetically herself. My phone buzzed with a text from Sam. "Good luck today. You've got this." I smiled, grateful for her unwavering support throughout this tumultuous year. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed my briefcase and headed out the door. The hospital boardroom was intimidating, filled with stern-faced executives. As the newly appointed head of nursing, I was presenting my plan to revolutionize patient care. As I began my presentation, I caught a glimpse of a familiar face at the back of the room. Thomas. Our eyes met briefly, and I saw a flicker of recognition, then regret. But I didn't falter. Instead, I channeled all the strength I'd gained over the past year into my words, my vision for the future of healthcare. As I concluded, the room erupted in applause. The CEO stood up, beaming. "Vivian, this is exactly the kind of innovative thinking we need. You have our full support." Elation washed over me. This was my moment, my triumph. As the room cleared out, Thomas approached hesitantly. "Congratulations, Viv," he said softly. "You were incredible." I nodded, maintaining my composure. "Thank you, Thomas." He shifted uncomfortably. "I heard about your promotion, and now this. You've really flourished." "I have," I agreed, feeling a surge of pride. Thomas's face. "I made a terrible mistake, Vivian. Leaving you was the biggest regret of my life. Elizabeth, she used you," I finished for him. "I know, but Thomas, that's not why our marriage ended. It ended because you were willing to throw away everything we had built together." He nodded, his eyes brimming with unshed tears. "I know that now. Seeing you today, so confident and successful, I realized what I lost. Is there any chance we could?" I held up a hand, stopping him. "No, Thomas, what we had is gone. But I'm grateful for the journey, because it led me here." As I watched him walk away, shoulders slumped, I felt no joy in his misery. Instead, I felt a profound sense of closure. Later that evening, I met Sam for dinner to celebrate. As we clinked glasses, she grinned at me. "To Vivian 2.0, I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in years. "You know, Sam, a year ago I thought my life was over. I thought Thomas's betrayal had broken me." Sam reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "But it didn't. It made you stronger." I nodded, reflecting on the journey. It did. I realized that my worth wasn't tied to being someone's wife. It was always within me, waiting to be unleashed. As we finished our meal, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Elizabeth. "I saw the news about your presentation. Congratulations, Vivian. What you've achieved is truly inspiring." I smiled, remembering our conversation a year ago. Elizabeth had kept her promise, coming clean to Thomas and facing the consequences of her actions. In an unexpected turn of events, we had developed a cautious friendship, bonding over our shared experiences in a male-dominated world. As Sam and I walked out of the restaurant, arm in arm, I looked up at the starry sky. The future stretched out before me, full of possibilities I had never dared to imagine before. "You know, Sam," I said, "I used to think that the best revenge would be seeing Thomas miserable. But now I realize the best revenge is living my best life." Sam grinned, giving me a playful nudge, and boy, are you living it. As we parted ways, I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. The journey had been painful, filled with betrayal and heartbreak, but it had led me here, to this moment of triumph and self-discovery. I was Vivian, stronger and more vibrant than ever before. And this was just the beginning of my story. I stared at my phone, dumbfounded by Kevin's invitation. It had been years since we last spoke, our lives diverging after college. While his carefree spirit beckoned adventure, my world revolved around spreadsheets and the monotonous rhythm of corporate life. "I don't know, Kev," I said hesitantly. "A camping trip seems—" "Exactly what you need," he interrupted. "When was the last time you stepped out of that office, Harper?" His words struck a chord. Between caring for my ailing father and the endless grind at work, I couldn't remember the last time I'd done something for myself. "You've got a point," I conceded. "But I can't just drop everything." "Yes, you can," he insisted. "One weekend, Harper. That's all I'm asking. We'll hike, tell stories by the fire, and you can rediscover that spark you've been missing." My practical side battled with the yearning for adventure. With a deep breath, I made a decision that would alter the course of my life forever. "All right, I'm in." The following Saturday, I found myself at a coffee shop surrounded by an eclectic group of Kevin's friends. As I sipped my latte, trying to appear nonchalant, Kevin approached with a tall, rugged-looking man in tow. "Harper, this is Miles," Kevin announced, "our resident outdoorsman and guide for the weekend." Miles extended a calloused hand, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "Pleasure to meet you. Kevin tells me you're an accountant?" I nodded, suddenly self-conscious about my corporate attire amidst their casual hiking gear. "Well, we'll have to toughen you up," Miles said with a wink. "The great outdoors doesn't care about numbers." His teasing put me at ease, and I found myself laughing alongside the others. As we set off for the trailhead, I couldn't shake the feeling that this trip would be more than just a weekend escape. The hike proved more challenging than I anticipated, but Miles stayed by my side, offering encouragement and tips. With each step, the weight of my responsibilities seemed to lighten. "First time hiking, Harper?" he asked, noticing my labored breaths. "Is it that obvious?" I replied, trying to mask my struggle. Miles chuckled. "Don't worry, we all started somewhere. Just take it at your own pace." As the day progressed, I found myself opening up to Miles about my life, the endless hours at the office, caring for my father, and the constant feeling of being trapped. He listened intently, understanding the burdens I carried. That night, huddled around the campfire, I felt a sense of belonging I hadn't experienced in years. Miles's stories of his adventures captivated me, painting vivid pictures of landscapes I'd only dreamed of seeing. "Why don't you ever travel, Harper?" he asked, his gaze piercing through the flickering flames. I shrugged, unsure of how to articulate the weight of my responsibilities. Too much to leave behind, I guess. Miles nodded, understanding without judgment. In that moment, I caught a glimpse of a different life, one filled with freedom and possibility. The next morning, I awoke in the tent, my body aching but my spirit renewed. As I emerged, Miles was already brewing coffee over the campfire. "Morning, Harper," he greeted with a warm smile. "Ready for another adventure?" I took a deep breath, savoring the crisp mountain air. As ready as I'll ever be, and for the first time in years, I truly meant it. The morning after our camping trip, I found myself back at the coffee shop, surrounded by Kevin's friends. The air buzzed with excitement as everyone recounted their favorite moments from the weekend. "Did you see the look on Harper's face when she reached the summit?" Kevin teased, nudging me playfully. "I thought she was going to keel over." I rolled my eyes, but couldn't help grinning. "Hey, cut me some slack. It was my first real hike." "You did great, Harper," Miles chimed in, his voice sending a flutter through my chest. "Not everyone takes to the outdoors like a natural." Our eyes met, and for a moment it felt like we were the only two people in the room. Kevin cleared his throat, snapping us back to reality. "So who's up for another adventure next month?" he asked, rubbing his hands together mischievously. The group erupted in a chorus of cheers and laughter, but I stayed silent, suddenly aware of the weight of my responsibilities waiting for me at home. Miles must have noticed my hesitation. "You know, Harper, you don't have to decide right away," he said gently. "Just think about it." I nodded, grateful for his understanding. As the group dispersed, Miles lingered behind. "I meant what I said out there," he murmured. "You were incredible this weekend. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Before I could respond, he pulled me into a warm embrace, his rugged scent enveloping me. My heart raced as we parted, his touch igniting a spark I thought had long extinguished. "See you around, Harper," he said with a wink, disappearing into the bustling city streets. Over the next few months, our camping trips became a regular escape from the monotony of daily life. With each adventure, Miles and I grew closer, our bond strengthened by the shared challenges and triumphs of the great outdoors. One evening, as we sat around the crackling campfire, Miles turned to me with a contemplative expression. "Have you ever thought about doing something different with your life?" he asked, his eyes reflecting the dancing flames. I shrugged, unsure of how to respond. "Like what?" "I don't know," he mused. "Traveling, maybe? Seeing the world beyond those spreadsheets and cubicles?" His words struck a chord within me, awakening a yearning I'd long suppressed. Before I could overthink it, the words tumbled out. "I'd love that, Miles, but with my dad's health and my job." I trailed off, the weight of my responsibilities crashing down once again. Miles reached out, taking my hand in his calloused grip. "Harper, you can't live your life for other people. You deserve to be happy too." His words resonated deeply, and in that moment, I knew something had to change. I couldn't continue sacrificing my dreams for the sake of others' expectations. "You're right," I said, my voice trembling with a newfound determination. "I can't keep living like this." Miles smiled, his eyes shining with pride. "That's my girl." From that night on, a shift occurred within me. I started making plans, exploring options, and dreaming of a life beyond the confines of my routine. And through it all, Miles remained by my side, unwavering in his support and belief in me. Little did I know the path I was embarking on would lead me down a twisted trail of deception and heartbreak, testing the very limits of my resilience and resolve. The crisp mountain air filled my lungs as our group embarked on another hiking adventure. Miles led the way, his confident strides guiding us deeper into the wilderness. "All right, everyone, we'll take the scenic route today," he announced, adjusting his backpack. "It's a bit more challenging, but the views are worth it." I exchanged a nervous glance with Kevin, who just shrugged and grinned. "You heard the man, let's do this." As we trekked along the winding trail, I couldn't help but steal glances at Miles. The way he navigated the terrain with such ease and grace was captivating. "Need a hand?" he asked, slowing his pace to fall in step beside me. I shook my head, determined to prove myself. "I've got this." Miles chuckled, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "Stubborn as always. I like that about you, Harper." His words sent a flutter through my chest, and I had to force myself to keep my focus on the trail ahead. After a grueling ascent, we finally reached a breathtaking overlook. Miles gestured for me to join him at the edge, and I gasped at the panoramic view that stretched out before us. "Incredible, isn't it?" he murmured, his voice low and intimate. I nodded, words failing me in the face of such natural beauty. In that moment, it felt like Miles and I were the only two people in the world. As the others settled down for a well-deserved break, Miles turned to me with a mischievous grin. "Up for a little detour?" he asked, his eyes sparkling with adventure. Before I could respond, he grabbed my hand and led me down a narrow path, veering off the main trail. My heart raced with a mixture of excitement and apprehension, but I trusted Miles implicitly. After a short hike, we emerged into a secluded clearing, a pristine waterfall cascading into a crystal-clear pool. "Miles, this is—" I trailed off, unable to find the words to describe the breathtaking scene before us. He simply smiled, that familiar twinkle in his eye. "I thought you might like it." Without hesitation, Miles began stripping off his hiking gear, and I averted my gaze, suddenly flustered. "What are you doing?" I asked, my cheeks flushing. "Going for a swim," he replied nonchalantly. "Care to join me?" Before I could protest, he dove gracefully into the pool, resurfacing with a playful splash. I couldn't help but laugh at his carefree spirit. "Come on, Harper," he called out. "Live a little." Biting my lip, I weighed my options. Part of me wanted to cling to the safety of my comfort zone, but a larger part yearned for the freedom and spontaneity that Miles embodied. With a deep breath, I stripped down to my undergarments and slipped into the cool, refreshing water. Miles beamed, pulling me into an embrace that sent shivers down my spine. "That's my girl," he murmured, his lips dangerously close to mine. In that moment, surrounded by nature's untamed beauty, I felt more alive than I had in years. Miles had awoken a part of me I thought had long been extinguished, a thirst for adventure, for living life to the fullest. As we floated together in the tranquil pool, our bodies intertwined, I knew that my life would never be the same again. Miles had shown me a world beyond the confines of my routine, and I was determined to embrace it, no matter the cost. Little did I know, the path I had chosen would lead me down a twisted trail of deception and heartbreak, testing the very limits of my resilience and resolve. As the sun dipped below the horizon, our group gathered around the crackling campfire, the dancing flames casting flickering shadows across our faces. The air was thick with the scent of wood smoke and camaraderie. "All right, who's got a good story to share?" Kevin asked, rubbing his hands together in anticipation. A chorus of laughter and protests erupted, but Miles remained silent, his gaze fixed on the flames. I studied his profile, mesmerized by the way the firelight played across his rugged features. "What about you, Harper?" he said suddenly, turning to me with a warm smile. "I'm sure you've got some tales from the corporate world." I shrugged self-consciously. "I don't know, Miles. My life isn't exactly the stuff of adventure novels." He leaned closer, his eyes holding a hint of mischief. "Come on, there has to be something interesting in all those spreadsheets." Faced with his playful prodding, I found myself recounting a particularly harrowing tax season, complete with all-nighters and office drama. To my surprise, the group was enraptured, hanging on my every word. As the laughter died down, Miles caught my eye, a silent understanding passing between us. In that moment, I realized how much I'd been missing out on. the simple pleasures of good company and shared experiences. "Your turn, Miles," I challenged, emboldened by the warmth of the fire and the camaraderie surrounding us. He grinned, that familiar twinkle in his eye. "All right, but brace yourselves. This one's a doozy." Miles launched into a captivating tale of his solo trek through the Himalayas, his words painting vivid pictures of treacherous mountain passes and breathtaking vistas. As he spoke, I found myself leaning in, hanging on his every word, desperate to soak up every detail of his adventures. When he finished, the group erupted in a chorus of appreciative cheers and applause. But Miles's gaze was fixed on me, his eyes shining with a depth of emotion that sent my heart racing. "Why don't you ever travel, Harper?" he asked, his voice low and intimate. I hesitated, suddenly aware of the weight of my responsibilities. Responsibilities, I guess. Too much to leave behind. Miles nodded, his expression understanding. "I get it, but you can't let life pass you by." His words struck a chord within me, awakening a yearning I'd long suppressed. Before I could respond, Kevin chimed in, oblivious to the moment he'd interrupted. "All right, enough with the heavy stuff," he said, clapping his hands together. "Who's up for some ghost stories?" The group erupted in a chorus of laughter and excited chatter, but Miles and I remained locked in our own private moment, a silent understanding passing between us. As the night wore on, I found myself gravitating closer to Miles, drawn in by his warmth and charisma. We shared stories and laughs, our connection deepening with every passing moment. When the fire finally dwindled to embers, Miles stood, offering me his hand. "Take a walk with me?" Without hesitation, I accepted, allowing him to lead me away from the camp and into the embrace of the starry night. We strolled in comfortable silence, our shoulders brushing with every step. Finally, Miles stopped, turning to face me. "Harper, His voice trailed off, but his eyes spoke volumes, conveying a depth of emotion that left me breathless. Before I could respond, he pulled me into a searing kiss, his lips claiming mine with a fierce intensity. In that moment, all my doubts and fears melted away, replaced by a burning desire that consumed me from the inside out. When we finally broke apart, gasping for air, Miles rested his forehead against mine. "You're incredible, Harper," he murmured, his words sending shivers down my spine. "Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise." As we made our way back to camp, our fingers intertwined, I knew that my life had been forever changed. Miles had awakened a fire within me, a thirst for adventure and passion that I could no longer ignore. Little did I know, the path I had chosen would lead me down a twisted trail of deception and heartbreak, testing the very limits of my resilience and resolve. I awoke to the gentle rustle of the tent fabric, the crisp morning air seeping in. As I blinked away the remnants of sleep, the memories of the previous night came flooding back. Miles's kiss, the intensity of his embrace, the way he had ignited a fire within me. Carefully I unzipped the tent flap, squinting against the bright morning sun. Miles was already up, tending to the campfire, his movements fluid and confident. He glanced up as I emerged, a warm smile spreading across his rugged features. "Morning, sleepyhead," he greeted, his voice rich and inviting. "Coffee's almost ready." I nodded, still feeling a bit dazed from the events of the night before. As I approached the fire, Miles handed me a steaming mug, his fingers brushing against mine in a simple yet electrifying touch. "Thanks," I murmured, taking a tentative sip and savoring the rich, earthy flavor. Miles studied me for a moment, his eyes sparkling with amusement. "You look like you could use some more rest. Rough night?" A flush crept up my cheeks as I recalled the passionate embrace we had shared under the stars. "You could say that." He chuckled, that familiar twinkle in his eye sending butterflies fluttering through my stomach. "Well, I hope you're ready for another adventure today. I've got something special planned." I raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Oh, and what might that be?" Miles simply grinned, that mischievous glint in his eye. "It's a surprise, but trust me, you're going to love it." As we set off on the day's hike, I couldn't help but steal glances at Miles, my mind replaying the events of the previous night. The way he had held me, kissed me, it was as if he had awoken a part of me that had been dormant for far too long. Miles seemed to sense my distraction, reaching out to give my hand a gentle squeeze. "You okay over there?" I nodded, offering him a reassuring smile. "Yeah, just taking it all in." He grinned, that infectious enthusiasm lighting up his face. Well, get ready, because we're almost there. As we rounded a bend in the trail, a breathtaking sight came into view. A secluded waterfall cascading into a crystal-clear pool, surrounded by lush foliage and towering peaks. Miles, this is... I trailed off, at a loss for words. He simply smiled, that familiar twinkle in his eye. I knew you'd like it. Without hesitation, he began stripping off his hiking gear, and I couldn't help but admire the toned lines of his body. When he caught me staring, he winked playfully. Care to join me for a dip? I bit my lip, suddenly self-conscious. But the allure of the cool, inviting water, and the prospect of being close to Miles again, was too strong to resist. Slowly, I peeled off my own layers, trying to ignore the way Miles's gaze raked over my exposed skin. When we were both down to our undergarments, he extended his hand, his eyes burning with an intensity that set my heart racing. Trust me, he murmured, his voice low and seductive. I placed my hand in his, allowing him to lead me into the refreshing embrace of the pool. As the water enveloped us, Miles pulled me close, his muscular arms wrapping around me in a possessive embrace. You're incredible, Harper, he whispered, his lips brushing against my ear. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise. In that moment, surrounded by nature's untamed beauty and cradled in Miles's strong embrace, I felt more alive than I ever had before. He had awakened a fire within me, a thirst for adventure and passion that I could no longer ignore. As our bodies intertwined beneath the cascading waterfall, I surrendered myself to the moment, allowing the rush of desire to consume me. Miles claimed my lips in a searing kiss, his touch igniting a blaze of emotions that threatened to consume us both. Little did I know that the path I had chosen would lead me down a twisted trail of deception and heartbreak, testing the very limits of my resilience and resolve. But in that moment, none of that mattered. Only the intensity of our connection, the promise of a future filled with passion and adventure. The waterfall's gentle roar filled my ears as I clung to Miles, our bodies intertwined beneath the cascading waters. His strong arms encircled me, our kiss deepening with a fierce intensity that left me breathless. When we finally broke apart, gasping for air, Miles rested his forehead against mine, his eyes shining with a depth of emotion that sent shivers down my spine. Harper, he murmured, his voice thick with desire. I've never felt this way about anyone before. I traced the sharp line of his jaw, marveling at the way the water droplets clung to his tanned skin. Neither have I. He captured my hand in his, pressing a tender kiss to my palm. Stay with me, Harper. Let's make this adventure last forever. My heart raced at the implications of his words, the promise of a future filled with passion and freedom. Before I could respond, he silenced me with another searing kiss, his touch igniting a fire within me that threatened to consume us both. From that moment on, our bond only deepened, forged in the crucible of our shared experiences and the intensity of our connection. Miles showed me a world beyond the confines of my routine, a life filled with adventure and possibility. A year later, as we stood hand in hand beneath the same waterfall where our love had blossomed, Miles dropped to one knee, his eyes shining with determination. Harper, he began, his voice steady despite the tremor of emotion. You've shown me what it means to truly live, to embrace every moment and cherish the beauty in this world. You've awakened a fire within me that I never knew existed. He reached into his pocket, producing a simple yet elegant ring. Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Of embarking on the greatest adventure of all, a life together? Tears of joy streamed down my cheeks as I nodded, rendered speechless by the depth of his love and devotion. Miles slipped the ring onto my finger, sealing our promise with a kiss that set my soul ablaze. Our wedding was a simple yet beautiful affair, a celebration of our love and the unbreakable bond we had forged. As we exchanged vows beneath the open sky, surrounded by the majestic peaks that had witnessed the blossoming of our romance, I knew that I had found my forever. The years that followed were filled with adventure and passion, our love only growing stronger with each challenge we faced together. We traveled the world, explored hidden corners of the globe, and cherished every moment of our shared journey. But eventually the responsibilities of life caught up with us. When my father's health began to decline, Miles didn't hesitate to support my decision to move him into our home and become his caretaker. Your family is my family, Harper, he assured me, his eyes shining with unwavering devotion. "We'll get through this together." Little did I know that those words would be put to the ultimate test, as the path we had chosen led us down a twisted trail of deception and heartbreak, testing the very limits of our resilience and resolve. 4 years after our fairy tale wedding, the harsh realities of life began to catch up with us. My father's health had taken a turn for the worse, and the decision to move him into our home weighed heavily on both of us. "Are you sure about this, Harper?" Miles asked, his brow furrowed with concern. "It's a huge responsibility." I nodded, my resolve unwavering. "He's my dad, Miles. I have to do this." Miles pulled me into a warm embrace, his strong arms offering reassurance. "You know, I'll be here every step of the way, right? We're in this together." His words brought me comfort, but deep down, I knew the strain this would put on our relationship. Caring for my ailing father would consume much of my time and energy, leaving little room for the adventurous lifestyle we had once enjoyed. True to his word, Miles stepped up to the challenge, helping with my father's care and offering unwavering support. But as the months wore on, the financial burden began to take its toll. "I've been crunching the numbers," I said one evening, my voice laced with worry. "Between Dad's medical expenses and the loss of my income, we're stretching thin." Miles reached across the table, taking my hand in his calloused grip. "We'll figure it out, Harper. Money isn't everything." But the strain was evident in his eyes, a flicker of doubt that he tried to conceal. I knew he was putting on a brave face for my sake, but the cracks were beginning to show. As my father's condition deteriorated, I made the difficult decision to quit my job, devoting myself entirely to his care. Miles supported my choice, but the financial strain only intensified. "I've been picking up extra work," he admitted one night, his voice tinged with exhaustion, "doing some freelance gigs to make ends meet." I studied his weary expression, guilt gnawing at my conscience. "Miles, you shouldn't have to shoulder this burden alone." He forced a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "It's temporary, Harper. We'll get through this, I promise." But as the weeks turned into months, Miles grew increasingly distant, his once vibrant spirit dimming under the weight of our circumstances. I tried to broach the subject, but he would brush me off, insisting everything was fine. It wasn't until I stumbled upon a stack of unpaid bills and notices from creditors that the truth began to unravel. Miles had been hiding a secret from me, a gambling addiction that had spiraled out of control, leaving us drowning in debt. When I finally confronted him, the floodgates opened, and the depth of his deceit came crashing down upon us. "I'm sorry, Harper," he choked out, his eyes brimming with tears. "I never meant for it to go this far." Anger and betrayal coursed through my veins as I realized the extent of his lies. The man I had trusted, the partner I had vowed to spend my life with, had been living a double life, jeopardizing everything we had built together. "How could you, Miles?" I cried, my voice trembling with anguish. "After everything we've been through, how could you do this to us?" His shoulders slumped, defeat etched into every line of his face. "I never asked for this life, Harper. I needed an escape." In that moment, the weight of his betrayal was suffocating, threatening to crush the very foundation of our love. As I looked into his eyes, I saw a stranger, a man consumed by his own demons, willing to sacrifice everything for the thrill of the gamble. Little did I know that this was just the beginning of a twisted trail of deception and heartbreak, a path that would test the very limits of my resilience and resolve, forcing me to confront the harsh reality of the man I had once called my soulmate. The weight of Miles's betrayal hung heavy in the air, suffocating me with each breath. As I stared into his tear-filled eyes, I saw a stranger, a man consumed by his own demons, willing to sacrifice everything we had built together for the thrill of the gamble. "How long?" I asked, my voice trembling with barely contained rage. "How long have you been lying to me?" Miles couldn't meet my gaze, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "Too long," he whispered, shame etching lines into his once vibrant face. In that moment, the full extent of his deceit hit me like a physical blow. The man I had trusted, the partner I had vowed to spend my life with, had been living a double life, jeopardizing everything for his addiction. As the shock began to wear off, anger took its place, a white-hot fury that coursed through my veins. "Get out," I spat, my hands balling into fists at my sides. Miles's head snapped up, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Harper, please, let me explain." "Explain what?" I shouted, the dam of emotions finally bursting. "How you've been gambling away our future. How you've been lying to me, day after day, while I poured my heart and soul into this family." He opened his mouth to speak, but I cut him off, the words tumbling out in a torrent of hurt and betrayal. "No, Miles. I don't want to hear it. Not anymore." I took a deep, shuddering breath, steeling my resolve. "I want you out of this house. Tonight." A flicker of defiance flashed in his eyes, but it was quickly extinguished by the weight of his shame. Without a word, he turned and walked out, the sound of the door slamming behind him echoing through the empty silence. In the days that followed, I methodically untangled the web of lies Miles had spun, uncovering the full extent of his gambling debt and the secret life he had been leading. With each new revelation, the man I had loved slipped further away, replaced by a stranger whose actions had shattered my world. It wasn't until I stumbled upon a hidden stash of letters and photographs that the final, devastating truth came to light. Miles had been living a double life, with a secret family and children I had never known existed. As I stared at the smiling faces of the woman and 2 children in the photographs, a wave of nausea washed over me. How could he have done this? How could he have so callously betrayed not only me, but an entire other family? In that moment, something inside me shifted. The anger and hurt gave way to a burning determination for justice, for retribution against the man who had so thoroughly deceived us all. With a steely resolve, I began to piece together a plan, meticulously gathering evidence and reaching out to Miles's other victims, his first wife and children, who had been left in the dark about his double life. When I finally confronted him, Miles broke down, his carefully constructed facade crumbling under the weight of his lies. "Please, Harper," he begged, tears streaming down his face. "I never meant to hurt anyone. I was weak, and I lost control." But his pleas fell on deaf ears. The man I had once loved was gone, replaced by a shell of a human being consumed by his own selfish desires. In the end, my revenge was swift and merciless. I exposed Miles's gambling addiction and secret family to our friends and loved ones, watching as his reputation crumbled to dust. His first wife filed for divorce, and he found himself cut off from the very support system he had taken for granted. As for me, I channeled my pain into a newfound purpose, helping other families torn apart by addiction and deception. Through my work, I found redemption and a sense of closure, finally able to leave the twisted trail of heartbreak and betrayal behind me. Miles's fate was sealed, a cautionary tale of what happens when one allows their demons to consume them. And though the scars of his betrayal would never fully heal, I took solace in the knowledge that I had emerged from the darkness stronger, wiser, and more resilient than ever before. I stood frozen, the world crumbling around me as I watched Derek's lips locked with Amanda's in a passionate embrace. My heart shattered into a million pieces, the betrayal cutting deeper than any knife ever could. "Derek, how could you? After all we've been through?" I choked out, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and utter devastation. Amanda pulled away from Derek, her red lips curled into a smug grin. "Oh, he's mine now, Lily. You're just outdated." Her words stung like venom, each syllable twisting the knife deeper into my soul. I had dedicated my life to this man, sacrificing my dreams and ambitions to support his career and raise our family. And this was how he repaid me, by throwing it all away for a young, vapid thing like Amanda. I should have seen the signs earlier. The late nights at the office, the unexplained expenses, the distant looks he'd give me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. But I had been too blinded by love and loyalty to notice the cracks forming in our once perfect marriage. "Get out," Derek spat, his eyes cold and unrecognizable. "You're making a scene." I wanted to scream, to cry, to hurl every insult and accusation I could muster at them both. But I found myself paralyzed, my throat constricted by the weight of my shattered hopes and dreams. With what little dignity I had left, I turned and walked away, each step feeling heavier than the last. As I made my way out of the office, I couldn't help but wonder where it had all gone wrong. Just that morning, I had awoken before dawn, as I did every day to prepare Derek's favorite breakfast and ensure his suit was pressed to perfection. It was a routine I had followed for decades, a labor of love that had once brought me joy. But now, as I looked back on the sacrifices I had made, the countless times I had put his needs before my own, I felt a bitter taste of regret lingering on my tongue. How could he do this to me? To us? As I stepped out into the cool morning air, the weight of his betrayal finally hit me full force. Tears streamed down my face, hot and unrelenting, as I made my way to the car. I had always prided myself on being a strong, resilient woman, but in that moment I felt utterly broken. The man I had loved and trusted with every fiber of my being had shattered my heart into a million pieces, and I didn't know if I would ever be able to put it back together again. The office became a battleground, with Amanda asserting her dominance like a lioness staking claim over her territory. Every interaction felt like a thinly veiled attack, her words laced with venom and hidden jabs. "Lily, darling, have you considered retiring?" she would say, her saccharine tone dripping with condescension. "You've worked so hard for so long. Don't you think it's time to let the younger generation take over?" I would force a tight-lipped smile, swallowing the bitter retorts that threatened to spill from my lips. But with each passing day, it became increasingly difficult to maintain my composure. Derek, once my unwavering ally, seemed to be under Amanda's spell. He would nod along with her suggestions, his eyes glazed over as if in a trance. It was as if the man I had loved and built a life with had been replaced by a stranger. "Did you see the new marketing campaign Amanda put together?" He would gush, completely oblivious to the way his words cut me like a knife. "She's a real visionary." I wanted to scream, to shake him, and remind him of the countless nights we had stayed up late, dreaming of building this business together. But the words stuck in my throat, replaced by a bitter taste of betrayal. Nights became a blur of loneliness and heartache. While Derek was out working late with Amanda, I would sit alone in our once happy home, surrounded by the ghosts of memories past. Flashes of our struggling years would haunt me, the countless sacrifices we had made, the dreams we had deferred, all in the hopes of building a better life for ourselves and our family. And now it felt like all of that had been for nothing. "You're being paranoid, Lily," Emma would say, her voice laced with concern. "Derek loves you. He would never do anything to hurt you." But the evidence was mounting, and no amount of reassurance could ease the gnawing doubt that had taken root in my heart. Unexplained expenses, late nights at the office, the way Derek's eyes would linger a little too long on Amanda's form, it all painted a picture that I could no longer ignore. And then the final blow came. It was a lavish office party, one that Derek and Amanda had planned without so much as a word to me. As I stood in the corner, nursing a lukewarm glass of wine, I watched as they moved through the crowd like a perfectly choreographed dance. Amanda's laugh rang out like a bell, her head thrown back in exaggerated mirth, and Derek, my Derek, looked at her with a hunger that I had never seen before. It was in that moment that the last shreds of my denial crumbled away, leaving me raw and exposed to the harsh reality of their betrayal. As the night wore on, I found myself retreating further and further into the shadows, until I could no longer bear the sight of their happiness at my expense. With tears streaming down my face, I slipped out of the party and into the cool night air, my heart shattered into a million pieces. Derek and Amanda's relationship became more brazen, as if they were flaunting their indiscretion for all to see. The once subtle glances and lingering touches gave way to outright public displays of affection that left me reeling. "You two make me sick," I spat one day, unable to hold back the bile rising in my throat. Amanda merely laughed, her perfectly manicured hand resting possessively on Derek's arm. "Oh, Lily, don't be bitter just because you're past your prime." Derek said nothing, his eyes downcast like a scolded child. It was as if he had become Amanda's puppet, dancing to her tune without a shred of remorse. The office became a battleground, with Amanda taking every opportunity to assert her dominance over me. She would casually undermine my decisions, questioning my judgment in front of clients and colleagues alike. "Lily, darling, are you sure that's the best approach?" she would say, her voice dripping with false concern. "Maybe we should let the younger, more innovative minds take the lead on this one." And Derek, the coward, would nod along, his silence cutting deeper than any words ever could. It was during one particularly heated exchange that the final blow came. Amanda had once again overstepped her boundaries, belittling me in front of the entire staff. "Face it, Lily, you're a relic of the past," she sneered. "It's time for you to step aside and let the new generation take over, starting with Derek." That was the final straw. Years of pent-up frustration and anger bubbled to the surface, and before I knew it, I was unleashing a torrent of words that I could never take back. "You think you're so special, Amanda?" I snarled, my voice trembling with rage. "You're nothing but a cheap, home-wrecking tramp who's using her looks to get ahead." The room fell silent. Everyone's eyes trained on us like spectators at a gladiator match. Derek's face had drained of color, his mouth hanging open in shock. Amanda, for once, was speechless. Her perfectly sculpted mask of confidence had slipped, revealing the insecure, desperate woman beneath. In that moment, I felt a surge of power coursing through my veins. For too long I had allowed myself to be diminished, to be made to feel insignificant in my own life. But no more. With a newfound sense of determination, I turned on my heel and stormed out of the office, leaving a trail of stunned silence in my wake. As I drove home, the adrenaline coursing through my veins gave way to a profound sense of clarity. I had spent too long living in Derek's shadow, sacrificing my own dreams and aspirations for the sake of his success. No longer. From that moment on, I vowed to take back control of my life, to reclaim the power that had been stripped away from me piece by piece. Amanda and Derek may have thought they had won, but they had only awoken a force within me that they could never hope to contain. The battle lines had been drawn, and I was ready for war. The extravagant office party was the final nail in the coffin of my shattered marriage. As I stepped into the lavishly decorated ballroom, the weight of Derek and Amanda's betrayal hit me like a ton of bricks. They were the center of attention, basking in the adoration of their colleagues and clients, like royalty holding court. Amanda's sequined dress clung to her body like a second skin, her perfectly coiffed hair and makeup a stark contrast to the haggard, defeated woman staring back at me in the mirror that morning. "Lily, darling, you made it," she exclaimed, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "We were starting to worry you wouldn't grace us with your presence." Derek remained silent, his eyes averting mine as if he couldn't bear to look at me. The coward. "Of course I wouldn't miss this celebration," I replied, forcing a tight smile that felt more like a grimace. As the night wore on, I found myself retreating to the fringes, nursing a lukewarm glass of wine as I watched Derek and Amanda work the room like seasoned performers. They were a well-oiled machine, finishing each other's sentences and basking in the adulation of their adoring fans. It was sickening. At one point, I caught Amanda's eye from across the room. Her perfectly painted lips curled into a smug grin, as if to say, "I won. He's mine now." I wanted to scream, to hurl my glass at her and wipe that smug expression off her face. But I knew that would only give her the satisfaction she craved. So I did the only thing I could. I left. I slipped out of the party unnoticed, my heart heavy with the weight of my shattered dreams. As I made my way to my car, the tears I had been holding back finally spilled forth, hot and unrelenting. It was over. Derek had made his choice, and it wasn't me. The drive to Emma's was a blur, the streetlights blending together in a haze of grief and betrayal. By the time I arrived, I was a shell of a woman, hollowed out and broken. Emma took one look at me and immediately ushered me inside, her arms enveloping me in a warm embrace as I sobbed uncontrollably. "It's over, Em," I choked out between gasps. "Derek, he chose her." Emma's face hardened, her eyes burning with a protective fury I had never seen before. "That bastard," she growled, her grip on me tightening. "I'll kill him." I shook my head, too drained to even entertain the thought of vengeance. "It's not worth it," I whispered, my voice hoarse from crying. I need to get away from all of this." And so, with Emma's unwavering support, I packed what little belongings I had and moved into her spare room. It was a temporary solution, but it was the only thing keeping me afloat in the midst of my personal tsunami. In the days that followed, I became a ghost, a mere shadow of the woman I once was. I stopped returning Derek's calls, stopped going into the office, stopped caring about anything beyond the basic necessities of survival. It was as if I had retreated into a cocoon, shutting out the world and all its cruelties as I licked my wounds and tried to piece myself back together. But as the weeks turned into months, a fire began to ignite within me, a burning desire for retribution, for justice, for the sweet taste of revenge. Amanda and Derek may have thought they had won, but they had only awoken a sleeping giant, and I was determined to make them pay for every ounce of pain and humiliation they had inflicted upon me. The battle had only just begun. The fire that had been ignited within me burned brighter with each passing day, fueled by the sting of Derek and Amanda's betrayal. I knew that I couldn't let them get away with what they had done, not just to me, but to the life we had built together. It was Emma who first suggested seeking revenge. "They can't just treat you like that and get away with it," she fumed one night over glasses of wine that had become our nightly ritual. At first, I dismissed the idea, too consumed by my own pain and heartbreak to even entertain the thought of retaliation. But as the weeks dragged on and the humiliation of my public ousting sank in, a newfound determination took root. It was then that I reached out to Owen, an old high school friend who had always had a knack for storytelling and technology. If anyone could help me expose Amanda and Derek for the snakes they truly were, it was him. "So let me get this straight," Owen said, his brow furrowed as he nursed a beer across from me at our favorite dive bar. "You want to take down your lying, cheating husband and his mistress?" I nodded, my jaw set with grim resolve. "They think they've won, but they have no idea what's coming." A slow grin spread across Owen's face, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "All right, Lily, I'm in. Let's make these assholes pay." From that moment on, Owen became my co-conspirator, my partner in crime. We spent countless hours huddled over his laptop, scouring the internet for any shred of dirt we could find on Amanda's past. And boy, did we hit the jackpot. It turned out that Amanda was a serial homewrecker, leaving a trail of broken homes and shattered lives in her wake. She had a pattern, seducing wealthy, successful men, leeching off of them until they had nothing left, and then moving on to her next victim. "This is gold, Lily," Owen crowed, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he compiled our findings. "We're going to bury that bitch with her own past." With each new revelation, my thirst for vengeance grew stronger. I wanted the world to see Amanda for the manipulative, conniving snake that she truly was. And Derek? He was going to get a front-row seat to the destruction of his precious mistress. We started small, leaking snippets of information to local gossip blogs and forums, watching with glee as the whispers and rumors began to swirl. It was like throwing a match onto a pile of kindling, the flames of scandal licking at Amanda's carefully cultivated image. But it wasn't enough. I wanted more. I wanted to see them burn. So we took it a step further, creating an anonymous website dedicated to exposing Amanda's sordid past. We posted screenshots of her past conquests' social media accounts, detailing the heartbreak and financial ruin she had left in her wake. And then we waited. At first the reactions were muted, a few raised eyebrows, a few hushed whispers, but then, like a wildfire, the scandal took on a life of its own. Suddenly Amanda's name was on everyone's lips, her once pristine reputation tarnished beyond repair. I could see the cracks beginning to form in her perfect facade, the strain of the mounting pressure wearing her down. And Derek? Well, he was finally starting to see the true nature of the woman he had risked everything for. As the fallout intensified, I couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of satisfaction. This was just the beginning, a mere taste of the retribution that was to come. Amanda and Derek had made the mistake of underestimating me, of thinking that I would simply roll over and accept their betrayal. But they were about to learn a valuable lesson. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. And I was just getting started. The fallout from our anonymous leaks was swift and merciless. Amanda's carefully curated image began to unravel at the seams, the skeletons in her closet finally coming to light. At first she tried to brush it off, putting on a brave face and denying the allegations. But as more and more damning evidence surfaced, her defiant facade crumbled like a house of cards. It was during this time that I started receiving frantic calls from Derek, his once confident tone replaced by a desperate pleading. "Lily, you have to help me," he begged, his voice strained. "This whole thing is spiraling out of control. Amanda's past. I had no idea." I couldn't help but revel in his misery, savoring the sweet taste of his comeuppance. "What's the matter, Derek?" I taunted. Not so enamored with your precious Amanda anymore?" He fell silent, and I could almost hear the shame radiating through the phone. It was a delicious feeling, watching the man who had so callously discarded me squirm under the weight of his own mistakes. But as satisfying as it wasn't enough. I wanted more. I wanted to see Amanda brought to her knees to watch as her world crumbled around her. It was Owen who suggested taking things a step further, arranging a face-to-face confrontation that would force Amanda to confront the consequences of her actions. "Meet me at the old parking garage downtown," he texted me one night, the cryptic message sending a thrill of anticipation coursing through my veins. When I arrived, the dimly lit garage was deserted, save for a lone figure leaning against a sleek sports car. As I drew closer, the figure stepped into the light, and my breath caught in my throat. It was Amanda, her once flawless makeup smeared and her eyes rimmed with red. She looked broken, a far cry from the poised and confident woman who had stolen my husband's heart. "You think you can just tarnish my image and get away with it?" she spat, her voice trembling with barely contained rage. I couldn't help but laugh, the sound echoing off the concrete walls. "Oh, Amanda, this is just the beginning. You're going to lose everything you've schemed for." Her eyes widened, and for a moment I saw a flicker of fear cross her features, but just as quickly it was replaced by a steely resolve. "You have no idea who you're messing with," she hissed, taking a step closer. "I'll destroy you, Lily, you and anyone else who gets in my way." I held my ground, matching her icy glare with one of my own. "Bring it on, sweetheart. I'm not the one with a closet full of skeletons." With that, I turned and walked away, leaving her seething in my wake. It was a small victory, but it was enough to fuel the fire burning within me. From that point on, the gloves were off. Owen and I ramped up our efforts, leaking more and more damning information about Amanda's sordid past. We exposed her financial indiscretions, her web of lies and manipulation, leaving no stone unturned. And as her world crumbled around her, I couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of satisfaction. This was justice, plain and simple, a reckoning for all the pain and humiliation she had inflicted upon me and countless others. But even as Amanda's empire crumbled, there was still one final piece of the puzzle left to fall. Derek himself. He had been my partner, my confidant, my everything. And in the end, he had chosen the path of betrayal, casting me aside like a worn-out relic. Well, no more. It was time for Derek to face the consequences of his actions, to see the true monster he had aligned himself with. And I was going to make sure he had a front-row seat to the destruction. The endgame was in sight, and I was ready to unleash hell. The day of reckoning had finally arrived, and I was ready to unleash hell upon Derek and Amanda. With Owen by my side, we had orchestrated a showdown that would bring their web of lies and deceit crashing down around them. It all came to a head at a pivotal company meeting where the board of directors and key clients had gathered to discuss the future of the business. Little did Derek and Amanda know, but Owen and I had been working behind the scenes, gathering support from those disillusioned by the scandal. As Derek took the stage, his cocky demeanor betrayed no hint of the turmoil brewing beneath the surface. Amanda sat in the front row, her perfectly coiffed hair and designer outfit a carefully crafted mask of confidence. But I knew better. I could see the cracks in her facade, the subtle signs of strain that belied her true state of mind. Derek launched into his usual spiel, waxing poetic about the company's bright future and innovative vision. But this time, his words rang hollow, falling on deaf ears. That's when I made my move. Rising from my seat, I cleared my throat and stepped into the aisle, commanding the room's attention with a single pointed glare. "Derek, Amanda, I think it's time we address the elephant in the room," I announced, my voice steady and unwavering. Derek's bravado faltered, his eyes widening as he realized what was happening. Amanda, too, seemed to shrink back in her seat, her perfectly painted lips parting in a silent gasp. "For too long, you two have been running this company into the ground with your selfish, unethical behavior," I continued, my gaze sweeping over the sea of stunned faces. "But no more. The truth is out, and it's time for you to face the consequences." With a nod to Owen, he sprang into action, queuing up a presentation that laid bare the sordid details of Amanda's past. The affairs, the lies, the financial misdeeds that had left a trail of destruction in her wake. As the damning evidence played out on the screen, the room fell deathly silent, save for the occasional gasp or murmur of disbelief. Derek's face had drained of color, his carefully constructed facade crumbling before my very eyes. Amanda, on the other hand, had risen to her feet, her eyes blazing with fury. "You think you've won, Lily?" she snarled, her voice dripping with venom. "You have no idea what you've just unleashed." And with that, she turned on Derek, unleashing a torrent of accusations and revelations that left him reeling. "You want to know the truth, Derek?" she spat, her words cutting through the stunned silence like a knife. "I'm not the only one with skeletons in the closet." What followed was a brutal evisceration of Derek's character, as Amanda laid bare his own web of infidelities, financial misdeeds, and unethical business practices. It was a scorched earth tactic, a desperate bid to salvage what little shred of credibility she had left. But it was too late. The damage had been done, and the once mighty Derek stood before us, a broken and disgraced shell of a man. As the truth came crashing down around them, the board members and clients began to turn on Derek and Amanda, their voices rising in a chorus of outrage and disgust. It was over. Their reign of deceit and manipulation had finally come to an end, and they had no one to blame but themselves. In the chaos that ensued, I caught Derek's eye, and for a fleeting moment I saw a glimmer of regret, a silent acknowledgement of the devastation he had wrought. But it was too little, too late. The damage had been done, and there was no turning back. As Derek and Amanda were unceremoniously ushered out of the meeting, their once bright futures reduced to ashes, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction wash over me. Justice had been served and the scales had finally been balanced. It was a hard-won victory, but one that tasted oh so sweet. In the aftermath of Derek and Amanda's spectacular downfall, a strange sense of calm washed over me. It was as if a weight had been lifted. A burden I had carried for far too long finally cast aside. As I stepped into the role of leading the company, I felt a newfound sense of purpose and determination. No longer would I be content to exist in the shadows, sacrificing my dreams and ambitions for the sake of others. This was my time to shine, and I was going to seize it with both hands. One of my first orders of business was to implement the eco-friendly community housing project that Derek had always dismissed as a pipe dream. It was an idea that had been simmering in the back of my mind for years, a vision of sustainable living that prioritized the environment and fostered a true sense of community. As I unveiled the plans to the team, I could see the skepticism on their faces, the same doubt that had plagued me for so long. But this time, I refused to let it deter me. "This is the future, people," I declared, my voice ringing with conviction. "A chance to leave a lasting legacy, to build something that truly matters." And to my surprise, they rallied behind me, their initial hesitation giving way to a shared enthusiasm for the project. With each passing day, I could feel myself growing stronger, more confident in my abilities and my vision. Gone was the meek, subservient woman who had allowed herself to be pushed aside and belittled. In her place stood a force to be reckoned with, a woman who had stared adversity in the face and come out on top. It was during this time that I found myself leaning heavily on the support of Emma and Owen, my two closest allies in the battle against Derek and Amanda. "I can't believe how much you've grown, Lily," Owen marveled one night over drinks at our favorite haunt. "It's like you've finally come into your own." I couldn't help but smile, feeling a swell of pride at how far I had come. "It's always been within me, Owen," I replied, my voice tinged with a newfound confidence. I just needed to find the strength to let it out. As our eyes met across the table, I felt a spark of something unfamiliar, a connection that went deeper than mere friendship. It was as if, in the crucible of my personal war, a new bond had been forged, one that held the promise of something more. But I pushed those thoughts aside, content to simply bask in the warmth of Owen's unwavering support and the knowledge that I had finally found my footing. With each passing day, the wounds of Derek's betrayal began to heal, the pain and anger giving way to a sense of inner peace and strength that I had never known before. It was as if I had been reborn, emerging from the ashes of my old life like a phoenix, more resilient and determined than ever. And as I looked to the future, I couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement and possibility. The world was my oyster, and I was ready to take it by storm. No longer would I be content to exist in the shadows, sacrificing my dreams and ambitions for the sake of others. This was my time, my chance to leave a lasting legacy and build something truly remarkable. And with Emma and Owen by my side, I knew that anything was possible. The road ahead was sure to be paved with challenges and obstacles, but for the first time in my life, I felt truly prepared to face them head-on. Derek and Amanda may have tried to break me, but in the end, they had only succeeded in forging me into a stronger, more resilient version of myself. And as I stood on the precipice of a new chapter, I couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for the lessons I had learned along the way. The battle may have been hard-fought, but it was one that I had emerged from victorious. A warrior, a survivor, and a force to be reckoned with. The future was mine for the taking, and I had no intention of letting it slip through my fingers.